Hey everyone, welcome to Firescale Audiobooks. If you enjoy the audiobooks, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. If you'd like to support us further, consider becoming a Patreon member. As a member, you'll gain the ability to request the next part of a novel audiobook I've uploaded, depending on your Patreon tier.
As well equipped as he was, Nangong was only human. It was obvious from the fighting that he was no miracle worker. He reacted like any normal human would. This gave Hao Ren much relief and emboldened him enough to brick Nangong on the back of his head. With his MDT, this thingamajig finally has some use. Hao Ren yelped as he looked at Nangong lying stiffly on the ground. He turned the hexagonal device around as he took a good look at it, recalling the various unhappy experiences with the device. At last, he found a use for the device and it could not stop him. The MDT thought otherwise and it threw a tantrum inside his head for a good 5 minutes. Hao Ren felt he should have asked about a mute function before smacking Nangong on the head. Well, trouble's taken care of. Go wild. Hao Ren commanded the two with swagger. Vivian and Lily immediately morphed into their true forms and charged towards the armored wraiths with murderous intent. It did not take long for them to clear off the front ranks of incoming wraiths. Just as things were going according to plan, Hao Ren saw something that ticked him off. Another rope was lowered into the room. The gaunt-looking Indian monk had also stayed behind. He was coming down the same way Nangong did. Hao Ren glimpsed the two supernatural beings rampaging across the ranks of the wraiths and he looked at Nangong. He was determined to do something useful as the only man in the group. While the monk was still adjusting his sight to the light levels in the chamber, Hao Ren snuck up behind him and pulled the MDT out from his pocket. Just as he did so, the MDT screamed in his head. Cease at once. Usage air. A loud crack echoed as the MDT hit against the back of the monk's head. It appeared that the monk was equally human as Nangong and fell as he got bricked. The unlucky Sa did not even manage to touch the ground before Hao Ren took him out. He quickly dragged the unconscious monk aside. He threw an apologetic glance at the old men in funny robes. I'm so sorry. The situation demanded it. It would be even more dangerous if you were awake. Oh, that's rich. Vivian sneered as she spread her bat wings. He's still an elder. Shouldn't I be apologizing after bricking him in the head? Vivian shrugged and bitterly responded. Never saw you pay much reverence to me though. Hao Ren could not muster a response. With no further outside interference, Vivian and Lily could use the wide, illuminated area to their advantage. One mangled everything in sight with brutal strength while another whipped up a destructive, cyclonic spell. It was not long before hundreds of the walking tin cans were scattered all over the place. As effective as their attacks against the wraiths were, the opponents were immortal spirits. They would come back to life at a frightening pace if not reduced to dust. It did not take long for the scattered armor parts to reform. The sight and clanking sounds would send chills down anyone's spine. Hao Ren thankfully was used to it and surmised that a drawn-out battle against seemingly immortal enemies was a battle they would lose. Even Vivian's cyclones waned after some time. The cold air from her spell had already lowered the temperature in the room significantly. Hao Ren was indeed worried that he would freeze to death way before the armored were encased in ice. Either that or Nangong or the old monk would turn into ice cubes first. They needed to bring the field of battle somewhere with even more space. If not, they could just leg it. We need to figure this out fast. Hao Ren took a look at the hole on the ceiling. You know what, let's get up there and rethink our plans. We don't know how many of those tin cans are there. Fighting them all is just a waste of strength. Okay. Lily ran towards Hao Ren the moment she heard him, dragging one of the armored wraiths along with her. She had enough of the dark and dreary atmosphere. After swatting scores of wraiths with the one in her hand, she got herself ready to break out of the place. At the same time, Hao Ren dragged the unconscious Nangong and monk together. We still need to get them out as well. 2 of them, plus you. This won't be easy, Vivian frowned. She saw the ropes that they used to descend into the chamber and deftly slashed a long strand off. She passed the ropes to Hao Ren. Tie the 2 together. I'll drag them up. You and Doggy hold on for a bit. Doggy, can you come up by yourself? Lily looked up and nodded confidently. Just need a good leap. Hao Ren stared in awe at the athleticism Lily professed to have. After that, he quickly went about tying Nangong and the old monk together. Vivian lifted them out of the chamber not long after. Vivian flew back into the room seconds later. Well, that's that. I left them on the campsite. You really didn't hold back, did you? They won't be waking up anytime soon. Then, let's make our exit as well, Hao Ren nodded. He was suddenly reminded of the demon stone, which lay not too far from them. How do we deal with this? The cause of all the trouble was still lying in the middle of the chamber, buried in rubble. Surprisingly enough, there was nary a scratch on its surface. Hao Ren was pretty sure that the stone had already awakened, as a red glow had been emanating from it ever since it fell from the cage. And because of it, the wards protecting the chamber failed and the wraiths went berserk. That said, after the initial disturbance, the demon stone laid there in silence. No demons popped out from the void and it was forgotten as the combat went on. However, at that moment, they could not just leave it as it is. The stone glowed red again, signaling that it would not deign to stay there indefinitely. Plus, seeing how it affected the spirits within the chamber, leaving it behind was not an option. Hao Ren thought to at least move it somewhere away from the spirits, given that the wards had already failed. Leaving it in the demonic chamber would have made no sense. Vivian had no idea what to make of the demonic stone, but she also knew that leaving it behind was a bad idea. She then turned towards Lily. Doggy, grab that rock and bring it up. I'll carry Mr. Landlord back to the surface. Lily recoiled. Why me? Oh, you bloody twat. Before Lily could finish her sentence, Vivian had already grabbed Hao Ren by the nape and flew out of the chamber. God, fresh air does feel good. Hao Ren took a deep breath as he reached the surface and fell on his behind. He had done his part of the job, but he was merely human and his physical enhancement was the most basic of sorts. He still felt pain and soreness after all of that. He did not have enough strength left to even stand up. Let me catch a break. God, that was a hell of a mess. Where's Doggy? Vivian asked after a moment as Lily was nowhere to be seen. Did she run into trouble? Just as she finished her sentence, Vivian and Hao Ren heard Lily grunting as she jumped out of the hole vertically like a silver cannonball. With her was the demon stone. She managed to leap a good few meters into the air and gleefully said, "Didn't I tell you just a good leap will do?" Hao Ren and Vivian looked on as she fell back into the hole in the same trajectory. Lily was jumping in and out of the hole. Can someone give me a boost from behind? Or else I can't land on the ground. It took her 3 tries to finish her sentence. Vivian flew towards her and gave her a good kick. You bloody idiot. Can't you leap in a parabolic angle? To be fair, Vivian really relished the chance to help Lily. She was given the rare opportunity to blatantly kick her. The silly werewolf asked for it anyway, and of course, the vampire maiden would not do it perfunctorily. She knew her strength could not compare with that of the werewolf. Therefore, she purposely backed up for more than 30 meters before she ran towards Lily to give her a kick. The kick sounded like the ripping of silk. It was so powerful that it horrified Hao Ren, who was watching it. When Lily finally stood up, they started quarreling again as usual. The hole's as deep as a pothole. How am I supposed to jump over it? Lily was obviously focusing on the wrong thing. Can't you just run up to the hole a bit and take off from the side once you reach the spot? Even if you can't act quickly, you can still slightly adjust the angle when you're ready to jump, right? Such a dumbass. It's so embarrassing to be staying with you under the same roof. Vivian was not focusing on the right thing either. Can the both of you please quiet down? In the end, Hao Ren had to exert his authority as the landlord. It was not really powerful, but it helped both superwomen calm down. His shout finally brought the 2 ladies back to the issue at hand. The problem here isn't solved yet. What are we going to do about those armored wraiths underneath? What about the seal and runes which failed in the crypt? And most importantly, what should we do with this stone? Hao Ren pointed at the demon stone that Lily tossed aside. The 1-meter-long, black crystal was still the same as when it first awakened. It glittered steadily with a red glow under the dim light of night. Relying on his nerves of steel as well as strong support, Hao Ren cautiously stepped forward and knocked the stone a few times. He found that it was different from other stones which were usually cold. In fact, The stone was warm and vibrated slightly. He could even hear a voice, which sounded like hoarse whispers coming from the crystal when he put his ear close to it. The demon stone was like a restless tuning fork. It felt like there was a constant output of some kind of message. However, nobody knew how to stop it. At the beginning, Hao Ren just thought of getting out of there as soon as possible. This thought was consistent with his usual philosophy of safety first. However, when he revealed this, Vivian told him that it would not work. She told Hao Ren that demons were creatures who were extremely good at spreading their power through the medium. The moment the demon stone started pulsing, anyone exposed to its red light was already marked by the stone. The owner of the demon stone was capable of tracking down whoever that was close to the stone. Escaping was totally useless. It would have probably motivated the demon's interest to hunt them instead. When you're targeted by a demon, you only have two choices, Vivian reminded Hao Ren solemnly, as well as Lily, who was still in a state of confusion. You either hope that the demon isn't interested in you or fight it. There is no other way. The demon will spread its power everywhere and very few people can slip away under his nose. No matter how demons were portrayed in fiction and drama, the real demon Vivian knew was like this anyway. Hence, Hao Ren could only force himself to stay there and rely on Vivian, the old professional who used to deal with demons. They had to find a way to interrupt the connection between the stone and demon. If it's a low-level demon, my blood can cover the aura of the stone. Once the aura emitting from the stone is intercepted, the armored wraiths in the crypt should be able to calm down. At least, they'll become easier to deal with, said Vivian. She walked around the demon stone a couple of times, looked at it hesitantly and said, but if it's a demon of higher order, instead of blocking the signal, this will tell the stone's owner that there's something interesting here. Those crazy creatures love to fight, but only few can beat them. A senior in the Blood clan is exactly their target of provocation. Both of us are equally strong and we can fight for a long time. Lily limped around in circles and said, so, you're actually complimenting yourself indirectly. Now's not the right time to joke. Vivian stared at Lily and said, what does a little girl like you know? Nothing good comes from getting entangled with demons. They have a one-track mind and will go after their target to the death. I hate fighting, I don't know why. Anyway, I hate fighting and killing. Nobody wants to have any connection with those lunatics. Hao Ren glanced at Lily and asked, why are you walking like that? Lily showed Hao Ren her pitiful tail. A third of the fur had fallen off and the shape of the tail was a little crooked. I was hit by the rocks just now. It's gonna hurt for a few days, she said. Hao Ren looked up and thought that it was just a few scratches on the skin and lost fur after being hit by tons of falling granite. You really could not ask for more. Whatever. I'll just do it. Vivian seemed like she finally made up her mind. She gazed at the sky and said, the moon is vanishing. I need the moon's help to take care of the stone. If we keep delaying, I'm afraid even the dullest demon will wake up soon enough. Hey big dog, stand by. I feel a lot of wraiths approaching the ground. They're probably coming for the demon stone. Help us block them. Lily smiled with confidence and said, okay. Just block them, right? Vivian nodded without speaking. Silently, she stood a few meters away from the demon stone with her hands slightly opened. A thin layer of red mist started to disperse from her body. At the same time, Lily heard a familiar noise approaching them. The armored wraiths were still underground. However, they were about to reach the land above. The crypt used to have a very tight ceiling system. The demon's chamber, knight's tomb, and other similar key places were all hidden well. The lodge owner never discovered the shocking secret buried deep down below. He just walked through the tunnels on the upper layer and did not damage or touch anything in the crypt. However, hundreds of years had passed. The long time itself was strong enough to destroy the seals in the crypt. It just happened to reach the tipping point after all the things that transpired those few days. A large number of letter runes had lost efficacy and the demon chamber's holding powers had weakened. Not to mention, the crowd of paranormal enthusiasts who had gathered around the castle. Their wanton and grand exploration was the last straw that crushed the weakening crypt. It also caused the partial activation of the demon stone. It activated the defense mechanism of the crypt, woke the sleeping guards up and triggered their current situation. The later scene where the demon stone dropped onto the ground and glowed red was a full-blown awakening after the partial activation. In fact, the stone had begun to get a little antsy even before they entered the crypt. How else would Angus have been blocked by the rune wall, which suddenly appeared? The crypt was supposed to have traps to deal with a situation like this. When the demon chamber was activated and the armored wraiths could no longer handle the situation, all entries as well as exits of the entire crypt should have been blocked by huge, spellbound walls. They were supposed to suppress the demon. At the same time, the stone walls would have also prevented the wraiths from escaping and harming people. Unfortunately, the setting had already crumbled in time. All paths to the entire crypt were open before them. Additionally, the armored wraiths were all marching towards them. Clattering sounds could be heard. The familiar clatter of armor was suddenly getting clearer and clearer. Under the moonlight, the first armor popped up by a collapsed pillar not far away. Lily was ever ready. The girl with brute force lifted a huge piece of granite, about 1/2 meter wide and more than 1 meter long in both hands. Her face was full of excitement. When she saw the first wraith pop up, she threw the rock at it without hesitation. Although I don't know why the bricks here are so big, my Pegasus meteor attack is compatible with all cuboid ammo, said Lily. The granite, which weighed almost a ton, created a piercing sound in the air, rumbled down and hit the first armored wraith. The hit turned it flat. No matter how strong the armored wraith was, it was impossible to stand up after that. She did not really have to worry about the situation around the crypt, and she had an inexhaustible supply of bombs on hand. Lily, the superwoman of bricks, felt like she was invincible. She deeply believed that she could smash every armored wraith that showed up in front of her using the huge bricks littered everywhere in the castle. She got a little excited thinking about it, quickly howled loudly at the moon before it vanished completely. This was her signature move. When she felt like she was invincible, she just had to howl. While Hao Ren was startled by Lily's sudden howling, something even more frightening was happening. Not far behind, the rite carried out by Vivian had gone haywire. The demon stone was suddenly erupting an unprecedented red glow. A head-splitting voice rumbled from above. #UN%UN #UN at UN%#at. It was some kind of demonic language. They could not understand it. At that time, Hao Ren knew that Vivian's forever inextricable bad luck had contributed to her failed attempt. When the oppressive and horrible sound started coming from above, the air around Hao Ren suddenly felt like it was burning. The blood mist that Vivian released had already covered the demon stone completely. However, a shock wave erupted from the stone out of nowhere and shattered the mist in seconds. Even Vivian was forced a few steps back by the shock wave. Watching the power of her blood slowly disappear, she could not believe it and said, "This is a waste. I could have eaten that." Hao Ren instantly detached himself from the present situation. The vampire tried to smooth things over and she gave her best, but atmosphere was really ruined. At that time, Lily was holding a giant stone pillar which was several meters long. She kept smashing the armored wraiths. The impact was so strong that the whole castle seemed to be experiencing an earthquake. However, the horrible sound in the sky made her stop immediately. The werewolf girl looked up in shock and saw that the sky was covered with dark clouds. The stars and moon had vanished. A large mass of filthy, dark clouds were gathering from all directions. The clouds were thick like some kind of substance. They tumbled through the sky like a swamp hanging upside down. It looked horrible and disgusting. As the clouds gathered, a dark red blaze began to spread behind them. It was as though there were miles of flames spanning from the black clouds. In the brightest part of the fire, an opening in the shape of a vortex was slowly forming. Immense pressure and an unbearable heat wave were coming right from the opening. The blaze was not an illusion. It was actually loaded with a sea of fire, an endless roaring flame coming from the demon dimension. "It's hot, it's so hot," yelled Lily as she continued to wipe out their enemies desperately. She swung the huge, stone pillar and smashed the big crowd of armored wraiths into irretrievable scrap. However, the giant stone pillar was already weathered, so it was unable to withstand Lily's rough handling. It finally broke after a few waves of wraith attacks. Lily was stunned for a moment, but surrounded by the crazy armored wraiths, it was no time for her to stop. She could only throw away the pillar and pick up other bricks of the same length around her. She threw them everywhere and shouted, "F***ck off. Are you guys done here? Landlord, I don't want to play anymore. I want to go home." While the clouds in the sky continued to gather together, the armored wraiths in the castle seemed to go crazy in response. The letter runes on their bodies were red and shining as if they were just seared onto the armor. Lily was wiping out the wraiths alone. Although she could still handle it, she was obviously frightened by the upheaval. Hao Ren knew that Lily was almost in tears from her voice. The werewolf was just a little cub, she was still too young. However, Hao Ren was not that old as well. He was not even married yet. Vivian spread her wings and flew to Hao Ren. The cold air surrounding the vampire managed to slightly disperse the unbearable heat. Hao Ren regained his senses in the cold air and asked, "What's wrong?" "I don't know." Vivian still could not believe what just happened. She could not understand exactly what was wrong with and tried to explain. It was smooth in the beginning. I also sense that the strength of the demon stone's owner should be the same as mine. As long as it's sealed carefully, the problem can be solved perfectly with the help of moonlight, but I don't know what happened. I just lost control. This rock works in a whole different way than the demon stone I know it. Okay. I don't get it anyway, said Hao Ren. He then held onto Vivian's shoulder. He could hear noises echoing in his head and they made it hard for him to concentrate. Why is my head full of noises? Demonic power will affect the minds of ordinary people. Vivian said loudly. She knew that her blood magic to banish mental pollution was not going to work on Hao Ren. Since being anxious would not have helped either, she got ready to fight instead. The vampire maiden flew up into the air and a pair of giant bat wings opened up on her back. Countless blood-red streams of light emerged from the air and condensed into a complex pattern behind her. Hao Ren felt a strong pressure spreading from Vivian's body. It was nothing like he had ever seen before and was far more powerful than her usual performance. Vivian stared at the spiral door in the sky. There was already a huge foot which looked like the hoof of a beast, stepping out from the vortex. She had to completely unleash her power before the entire demon got out of the vortex. It had been thousands of years since Vivian last used such power. She was unsure if she could fully control it. A clear flash of light suddenly pierced the thick, dark clouds in the sky and they seemed to be torn apart by force. An unusually bright, silver moon emerged from the rift. Hao Ren's attention was immediately drawn to the extraordinary sight. He thought it was the previously obscured moon. However, he soon realized that it was not the right time. The moon should not have been in that position. Then, he noticed that the silver moon in the sky was much larger than usual. Additionally, the texture of the moon was clearly visible but he had never seen anything like it before. Before he could observe it further, the surface of the moon was covered with a layer of blood-like redness. The entire moon almost turned into a completely red sphere. At that moment, the red, ominous light in the sky even covered the sea of flames behind the clouds. The demon's power was suppressed in an instant. Of course, it could have been an illusion. After all, Hao Ren did not know anything about power sensing and psionic scanning. He just thought that the strange moon Vivian summoned was brighter than the flames amid the clouds. The surrounding armored wraiths lost their purpose under the glow of the blood moon and began to wander in a daze. Lily looked up and stared blankly at the eerie moonlight. The fur on her ears and tail were slowly standing up one by one. I feel a little sick, she said. A loud bang broke the short stalemate. The flames in the sky surged uncontrollably and the vortex was completely opened. Then, a giant demon crashed down to the ground. For a moment, the earth trembled and the mountains shook, throwing sand and stones in all directions. Hao Ren and Lily stepped back instinctively. A figure burning in raging flames slowly rose within the dusty haze. After the dust had dispersed, the demon's figure was revealed. It was a 5-meter-tall humanoid creature with crooked legs akin to a goat's hoofs and stout, strong arms. Its skin was dark as iron and each bulging muscle was filled with traces of flames as well as lava. The raging flames formed the demon's armor and molten iron dripped slowly from the cracks on its skin. The demon's entire body was like an erupting volcano and its body was of an extremely high temperature. The flames and the lava were as real as they could be. Hao Ren had to straighten his neck in order to see the demon's face clearly. What he saw was a grim face as if carved from obsidian. The demon had facial features but there were flames pouring out of every hole on its face. It seemed as though the face existed only to make the demon look more ferocious. The demon's head had a pair of curved, long horns. They looked like the horns of a black goat, just as the legends had described. Hao Ren noticed that one of the demon's horns was chipped. About 1/3 of the horn had broken off at the tip. Vivian was stunned when she saw the demon. She hesitated to attack it because she found that this demon was quite different from the breed she knew of. While the demon had the similar powerful presence and appearance, it was not the kind of breed she had seen before. She did not know if it was a good idea to rashly attack an opponent when its clan, strength, and fighting style were all unclear. The demon, however, did not seem to care about Vivian, who was glaring at it fiercely from the side. It just peered below and searched around until it found a petrified Hao Ren. A roar, which sounded like muffled thunder, came from the demon's mouth. #@UN #UN %@%UN #at, asked the demon. What? Hao Ren could not understand it. #@UN %% #at %%. Hao Ren was surprised when he realized that the demon was talking to him. But, who the heck would understand demon language? The demon appeared to suddenly realize the problem. Hao Ren guessed it from its expression. It was quite difficult to see the demon's expression in the middle of the flames. The demon then did a scratching motion in the air and took a metal plate out of nowhere. It was a metal plate the size of a desktop. However, it was just like a tablet in the demon's hand. The demon scratched the metal plate for quite some time and laid face down on the ground, trying to keep his eyes parallel to Hao Ren's. You me landlord. Vivian had been holding herself up for quite some time. At that moment, she lost strength and finally dropped to the ground. The moment Vivian dropped to the ground, the blood moon in the sky disappeared. Without the scarlet light suppressing them, the wraiths started moving again. And so, the clatter of armors could be heard once more. Lily quickly lifted more giant bricks up, ready to fight. However, the first to act was the scary demon. When the horrible, 5-meter-tall creature raised its hand and scratched the air, the sea of fire as well as the thick clouds vanished in the blink of an eye. At the same time, Vivian also sensed that the demon's power around them was weakening rapidly. Eventually, even the energy response from the demon's stone slowly faded. The armored wraiths in the crypt were originally awakened by the demon's stone, which led them to the attack. Now that the root cause was interrupted, their will to attack dissipated. The letter runes on the armored wraiths were extremely burnt due to the demon's immense power. As such, they were mostly damaged. Since the demon's power had faded, the armored wraiths too completely lost motivation. The armor of each wraith trembled at the same time and then fell flat on the ground, motionless. The difficult problem of armored wraiths was solved. The huge demon nodded and seemed satisfied with its performance. Shortly after, it laid on the ground again and tried to keep its eyes parallel to Hao Ren's, but it was almost impossible due to the huge disparity in height. It looked at the metal plate on its hand, which seemed to be engraved with phonetic symbols, and asked, you my landlord. After it finished the sentence, the demon started to look at Hao Ren expectantly. Hao Ren was still confused. He almost lost his ability to think, having to face the bizarre situation in front of him. He did not respond until he felt something burning on his head. Sparks had spurted from the demon's mouth when it was talking. It lit Hao Ren's hair up. "Hey, it's hot," Hao Ren kept slapping his head. Fortunately, he put out the fire before his hair really got burnt. He jumped a few steps to the side before the demon spoke again. "Wait a minute. I can't understand your language." Then, he took the MDT out of his pocket with his trembling hand and asked, "Discus, what the heck is going on here? You're not respecting this device enough. Especially when you give me a very insulting nickname." The MDT preferred to answer Hao Ren telepathically. It did not even type out any subtitles. "But I'd love to tell you, everything is going according to plan." Hao Ren looked up at the terrible creature that was burning in flames and lava. He gulped and asked, "Do you have a demon language translation program? You finally remember the correct way to use this device? Do you remember the time you hit someone with this device?" mumbled the mobile data terminal. Hao Ren weighed the MDT and said, "If you keep talking nonsense, I'll tie you to a stick and turn you into a hammer." The MDT kept silent. Hao Ren received help to translate the demon's language. He was finally able to communicate smoothly with the huge creature in front of him, although it seemed like the demon had been learning Chinese for quite some time. Then, "Are you the new tenant I'm looking for?" asked Hao Ren. The demon looked surprised. A stream of lava erupted from its biceps. How do you know Demon Lang? Oh, right, you're an agent. That's no surprise. So you're my landlord. Why are you so late? Hao Ren was completely lost. Not only did he not expect Raven's arrangement of the new tenant to be such a shocking one, he never thought that they would be talking in such a situation. Of course, he was now more curious about why the demon was summoned by the demon stone. It was sealed hundreds of years ago. Did Raven 12345 not say that the new tenant just arrived? When did you get here? As Hao Ren asked the question, he watched the demon's response carefully. Even if the demon looked friendly, he had to remain on high alert. After all, it was described as a vicious creature in many stories. Even the werewolf and vampire could not compare with the demon's position. It topped the ultimate boss chart of mankind's cultural system. Then again, YD Raven 12345, the woman who claimed to be a goddess, arranged for him to meet a demon. Me. I've been here for half a month. I've been asleep most of the time. I just sensed that something was happening outside, replied the demon as he continued spurting little sparks. Hao Ren jumped around while he listened to the demon to prevent himself from being lit up by the sparks. However, the demon was very polite. It insisted on looking at Hao Ren in the eye when it was speaking. Hao Ren felt like he was talking to a steel-making furnace. Half a month. Hao Ren was surprised. He pointed at the demon stone not far away and asked, "The stone has been sealed in the castle for centuries. You've just been here for half a month. Isn't this stone yours?" Nope. The demon shook its head and a large flame ignited. It continued to explain, "I don't know whose stone it is. I've never seen anything like it before. But I found it fit as a power medium, so I connected my strength with the stone. I was sleeping in another dimension, I needed a doorbell." Hao Ren thought about the big battle the three of them went through, how much fuss they created in the crypt and how much impact the demon stone received to finally summon the demon. "Your doorbell is not sensitive. It just started ringing after the house collapsed," muttered Hao Ren. The demon looked massive and its hearing was surprisingly sharp. It grinned and explained, "This stone works. It's just that I was sleeping soundly. Actually, it already activated when you got close and it took more than an hour to wake me up." Hao Ren instinctively stepped back to escape the flames coming from the demon. He appeared interested and asked, "The stone isn't yours? Then its original owner?" "It doesn't have an owner. I saw it first, so it belongs to me." The demon's rumbling voice silenced the second half of his sentence. Then the giant creature looked around and asked, "This place is badly damaged. It wasn't me, right?" Hao Ren weakly waved his hands and said, "Wait, I have to figure everything out." Hao Ren just sat down on the ground and started to ponder, not caring about the boss-level creature beside him. The things they went through were enough for a few movie sequels. There was no doubt about the demon's identity. The MDT would not have lied. The demon did not have to cheat him as well. To be frank, nobody would have came to disrupt the unusual mission arranged by Raven 12345. Hao Ren admitted that he was not worth the trouble of being plotted against. So, it looked like the demon was going to be his new tenant. The demon stone, sealed hundreds of years ago in the Yorkford Castle crypt, was real. However, the owner of the demon stone had nothing to do with the whole thing. The unlucky guy who lost the demon stone shall then be thrown into the garbage heap of history. Let us just forget about him. The demon came to the Yorkford Castle half a month ago. It went to the wrong place and did not seem to be familiar with this place. Due to this, it created a hidden space straight away, stayed there and borrowed the demon stone in the crypt. It then used the stone as a doorbell. Hao Ren guessed that the function of the doorbell was to sense the agent who was supposed to meet it. Then it meant that, the activation of the crypt's defense system, awakening of armored wraiths, blocking of Angus' pathway by the wall full of runes and etc. all happened because of him. It was the stone that sensed his presence nearby and activated the demonic power left in it, which then triggered a series of problems later. There were a lot of questions left unanswered in the whole process, but it was roughly going the way it should have been. What the heck is this? Hao Ren was coming to terms with the situation. He suddenly had the urge to cry. He then remembered one crucial question that had not been answered yet and asked, "Wait. Raven 12345 said that when I meet the new tenant, there would be some sort of mutual initiation between us. What about the initiation? Yes, there is. The MDT finally spoke and explained. Didn't you feel it the moment you met this big guy? Feel what? That little bang in your head. Hao Ren gaped and said, "That's it. That's the initiation." "What else do you want?" replied the MDT arrogantly. "I've considered your condition. Your mind is slow. I was afraid that during the critical moment, the general voice prompt and vibration mode would not draw your attention. That's why I specially made you the most noticeable reminder." "Couldn't you just explain it to me earlier?" said Hao Ren. The night was still long, but the castle was calm and peaceful. It seemed so, at least. One would have remained calm only if one did not see the spectacle in the castle. The 5-meter-tall demon sat with its legs crossed and still looked overly gigantic. Flame and lava spattered out constantly from it, turning the area within its 10-meter radius a glistening red. The stone under its butt had melted into lava. It was like sitting on a lake of magma. The demon and Hao Ren had verified each other's identity. Hao Ren even reconfirmed the result with the MDT. With that, the goal of their thrilling mission was finally accomplished. However, Hao Ren felt that the ordeal was rather surreal. "My name is Isax." The demon lowered its body as it spoke. It was a polite gesture on its part, but Hao Ren had to bounce about to avoid being burned and splattered with the demon's super-hot lava. The demon's thunderous voice was constantly intertwined with sounds of bursting lava. Its language sounded like a mouthful. It seemed complicated. If not for the powerful interpreting brain of the MDT, Hao Ren would have given up talking to the giant. The demon was heard speaking Chinese in a Japanese-English kind of accent. "The first time we meet, it's important to be talkative. It's said that this is the way to greet someone you meet for the first time here." Hao Ren was sweating profusely because the temperature around the demon was F***king hot. It was not known how Raven found the strange creature. Nonetheless, he gasped at the demon's ability to converse in a civil manner. He politely nodded towards the demon, which called itself Isax. "Nice to meet you too. Just call me Hao Ren. Did Raven 12345 brief you about us?" The demon replied with a wry smile, "Yes, I have been informed. I know what's going on. Please don't be afraid, I won't hurt people. I know demons aren't exactly welcomed creatures in most worlds, but there's no need for overreacting. You're an agent. Looks like you know about the word agent more than I do. In fact, I just signed up for the job." Hao Ren glanced at the demon curiously. "Actually, I'm not afraid. It's just that you're too hot to be around." The demon guffawed. "Ahaha, that's interesting. In fact, I've made contact with the Shiling Celestials and ended up owing them a favor in the process. So I'm totally aware of you. By the way, let the two maidens come. No need to be always on your guard. I'm not dangerous at all. All I ask is to live in peace and have a roof over my head." Hao Ren stared wide-eyed at the demon. Under the skin of its obsidian-like, rugged face seemed to lie a less grim personality, he thought, but it was terrifyingly ghastly at first sight. The demon sounded depressed though. If the favor he owed the Shiling Celestials was anything to go by, something might have happened to it. However, Hao Ren did not care at that moment. He turned around to speak with Vivian and Lily. "Okay. You two, please step forward. Vivian, could you please tuck your bats away? And Lily, please put down that damn rock. It's not your usual brick. It's a stone wall and it's over a meter long, mind you." Lily tossed the huge, 1-ton stone on the floor with a big thud before cautiously pulling closer to Vivian. The two maidens spoke no demon language, but they roughly grasped the meaning as Hao Ren and the demon spoke. Vivian stared marvelously at the huge burning lump. "Please tell me this thing isn't our new housemate." "Bingo. His name's Isax. It speaks no human language. So, I'll ask Raven if she can provide translation machines for you guys as well when I'm back there. By then, you guys will be able to communicate with ease." The demon had taken note of the introduction. It gave Vivian and Lily a million-watt smile. Lily's tail instantly puffed up. "Is it speaking in demon language?" Vivian glanced at Isax with a weird look on her face. "I've had numerous encounters with demons, but none spoke this way. It's speaking like a tape that's playing backwards, totally illegible." Speaking of which, Hao Ren also felt how bizarre its language was. Compounded with the accident that happened when Vivian tried to seal the demon stone, his curiosity for Isaac was piqued. I come from another world, Isaac spoke matter-of-factly. A world not of another planet but of a different universe. My world shares the same physical constants as yours, yet it is very far from here. The planet where I lived is a little bigger than Earth, so its gravitational force is a tiny bit stronger. But that's okay. It doesn't affect me much. Hao Ren was keeping mum. So the demon added, I was supposed to be assigned to another settlement which was roughly 2 billion light-years from Earth. However, I wasn't fond of the high-oxygen atmosphere there. Hence, I was reassigned to your planet. For over 10 seconds, Hao Ren stared at Isaac with his mouth agape before being perturbed by the demon's discord way of speech. He said with an odd look on his face, well, I get what you mean, but why did you describe it in such a way? I mean, you should have said that you came from another dimension or space, that you were summoned to this world by Raven with her mystic magic or something, that the force of the elements from both worlds are almost the same. I just think this should be the natural way a demon speaks. Aren't you a demon, the legendary creature? Isaac scratched its head in bewilderment. Why should I? It sounds weird. Plus, it isn't at all scrupulous, like the conversations found in popular, heroic novels of humans in my world 1,000 years ago. It feels out of place when a demon speaks in terms of planets and light years, Hao Ren said. Isaac shrugged. But we already found out that we lived in a spherical planet 1,000 years ago. Hao Ren was even more speechless. It seemed there was no point in carrying on such a conversation. Hao Ren thought that he had to resign to the Shiling Celestial's crazy settings for everything. Hao Ren turned to Vivian to explain the origins of Isaac. The vampire maiden was wide-eyed with astonishment as she listened. The idea of extraterrestrial life was something new to her. So much more, an alien from outer space in real life. Her perspective was broadened like never before. Lily, on the other hand, was unfazed. She was completely clueless. Hao Ren was, in fact, as amazed as Vivian. Although an employee of the Space Administration, he never made it to the other side of an alternate reality. In spite of this, Hao Ren forced himself to act calm as he wanted to be seen as a professional or cool person. He was not plain anymore, he had become an agent of the Space Administration, he thought. I think this isn't the best place to chit-chat. Hao Ren rose to his feet and said. Although he would have liked to carry on with the conversation, he realized they had lost track of time. He saw the light of dawn appearing across the horizon. They would risk being exposed and draw unwanted attention. He was particularly concerned that they were being watched. After all, they caused a racket with the arrival of Isaac and Vivian's exaggerated actions. However, he did not have the time to think over the trivialities. He needed to get Isaac out and back home fast. Hao Ren looked up. His heart sank when he saw that Isaac was already taller than a house even in a sitting position. He looked at the two maidens with a crying face. How do I get you back home? Raven 12345 did not tip him about the fact that the new tenant was a 5-meter-tall volcano. He was not sure if he could buy his way home with a little help from the international smuggler. Provided, of course, if he could pack the giant in a jumbo shipping container and ship it across the 7 seas. Even if he could have pulled that off, considering the ground under Isaac but had already melted into a pool of lava, what kind of special container was heat-proof enough to carry it? Isaac was cool and he just smiled. It's simple. As Isaac spoke, its body swiftly shrank and the burning flames as well as hot lava drew in and died down. Right on the spot, Isaac had shrunk and transformed itself into a 2-meter burly man. Now, how about this? You didn't say you could shapeshift. Yeah, you didn't ask either. Hao Ren was again speechless. The 2-meter-tall and brawny chap stood before the trio. He was dark and taut, his strong muscles seemed ready to burst out from his skin. He was wearing a black t-shirt but it looked too small to hide his muscular upper body. His rough face, big eyes, and bushy eyebrows could not help but give off a villainous impression. Frankly, he looked as badass as one could ever look on this planet. Isaac was eye-catching in its human form. However, Hao Ren found an inconvenient truth: he still had to look up when talking with Isaac. It was stressful enough just thinking about bringing the demon home. In a best-case scenario, the bald and burly fellow would cause a whole police department to scramble for backup just by standing in front of a police station. On the bright side, this looked miles better than the volcano form. Okay, let's move. Hao Ren sighed. He still had a lot to ask him, but it was not the best time and place. The light show upon the demon's arrival could have already attracted eyeballs from the town. The fire department too could have possibly arrived too by then. Wait till we get home. There are a lot more things I need to ask. Oh, something just crossed my mind. Hao Ren smacked his forehead as he suddenly recalled the time Angus admitted to his deception. The sighting of fire in the castle did not make sense. The fire which occurred at the very beginning of the haunting incident was not the doing of Angus. Was that your doing? Hao Ren related the haunting incident once again. So, you arrived at that time? He asked as Axe. Yes, it was me. I'm sorry for that. Isaacs apologized as he staggered out from the lava pool and stamped his feet to shake off the slag. His smile was as scary as ever, no matter how anyone described it. I was riding the Space Administration's immigration space vessel towards this planet. I flew myself during entry into the atmosphere, but I got lost. I was supposed to land at a designated landing zone which would attract less attention. Instead, I landed here. And the landing itself was quite a scene. However, instead of making a fuss out of it, the local residents appeared to be happy. So I didn't come out to apologize, as I was told not to blow my cover. Hao Ren had been in a cold sweat, but at least, he finally figured out the truth about the giant fireball Angus mentioned. With the sea of fire in the sky, Isaac's moment of arrival was indeed as grand as the eye could see. It was visible dozens of kilometers away. Hao Ren took the lead as they were leaving. However, just as they were about to leave, something came to Vivian's mind. Wait a second. Don't you think we need to clean up the scene? Vivian spoke while she pointed at a pile of rubble on the hill. The castle ruins became a complete mess after Lily dug out most of the stones from the wall and smashed the rest. Not only that, Isaac's landing site was strewn with slowly cooling lava. Soon, larsenite would form everywhere. When Nangong woke up, he would have definitely blown a huge hole straight down to the crypt. Plus, there were tunnel exits everywhere, which had been left open by the Wraith guards. Hundreds of ancient armor laid beneath the rubble. The letter runes on the Wraith guards were already defaced by the demon's power, so, theoretically, they would not have been walking anymore. Yet, there was no guarantee that the knights would not be alive and kicking. Obviously, leaving the mess to common people was not a good idea. Hao Ren wanted to wash his hands of the matter, but in an argument between his brain and heart, the idea of cleaning up the mess won him over. How do we go about this? Call for air support and blow the hell out of it. Hao Ren shrugged and said, I think we've got few options. How do we clean up this pile of mess with our bare hands in a short time? And mind you, I just saw some vehicles coming our way from afar. They're most likely from the town coming for the party. Isaacs looked on but could not understand Vivian and Hao Ren's conversation. Nevertheless, he had a rough guess. Isaacs guffawed as he scratched his shining, bald head. He then said, leave it to me. You guys may want to take cover somewhere. Sensing the demon's intention, Hao Ren could not wait to hurry Lily and Vivian up. They scrambled to a nearby hummock, leaving Isaacs behind in the castle ruins. Before they could set their feet on the hummock, a thunderous was heard coming from the castle. Keep going. The farther the better. Hao Ren was in terror. What's he going to do? Is he planning to level the whole damn place? He nudged Lily. Hurry up. That dude's going to make headlines. Oh yeah, Vivian, please get Nangong and the old monk. I think they should be awake by now. Hao Ren estimated that the Ghostbusters campsite where Nangong and the Indian monk were, was within striking distance. So he sent Vivian to get the two poor guys. Fortunately for them, Hao Ren was more thorough-minded than the two inattentive ladies. They would have been killed if left at the campsite. They moved swiftly to a hummock farther away. At the same time, Vivian found Nangong and the Indian monk still unconscious. Hao Ren's blow on them seemed really hard. Of course, the MDT's build was unquestionably hard. Just after Hao Ren set his foot on another hummock, he waited for action to occur in the castle. A flash of red light then illuminated the sky. The trio spontaneously looked up and saw the object. It was a meteorite. A freaking real meteorite. The massive meteorite was burning, leaving a long trail of fire as it entered the atmosphere. It was falling towards the castle with the accuracy of a guided missile. Hao Ren had only seen such a scene on TV or in video games like the Magic of Meteorite. However, this was the first time he witnessed such special effects in person. Lily was in awe and expressed a long woo-woo. Before she could finish wowing, the burning meteorite struck the castle with pinpoint accuracy. A loud bang accompanied the impact. The force was so powerful that Hao Ren could feel his skull quaking. Seconds later, a mushroom cloud of dust rose from the site of the. They could feel the earth trembling beneath their feet even though they were far from the impact point. A shock wave expanded outwards and towards them, carrying a strong smell of sulfur and dust. Things could have been terrible, much like the end of the world if they were nearer to the landing site. A real meteorite was so much more fun than the one in video games, Hao Ren thought. When everything settled down and went back to normal, the sky appeared to be torn in half. The shock wave had blown a clear opening in the sky, the clouds were cleared away. When the first ray of the morning sun shone across the land, the castle was completely gone. The rock, the hill, and the crypt, everything that stood there a moment ago had vanished. A burning crater had taken their place. Surrounding the crater were cracked lines in the earth created by the impact. While Hao Ren stood still in awe, a little whirlwind appeared and his axe emerged from it right beside him. The demon then spoke with an awkward expression on his face. Was it a little too loud? The meteorite, I brought it from the Kuiper belt. You know, I didn't have time to find a smaller one. I thought this one would be just fine, not knowing that it contained manganese nodules. I thought it was an ice rock. An ice rock would have been less powerful. By the way, your solar system is one hell of a place, a perfect place for meteorite fireworks. Hao Ren remained silent. Hao Ren shook his head helplessly. The can of worms is gone. We'll leave the meteorite to the English astrophysicists to explain. Let's go, guys, hurry up. By then, Nangong, who was lying on the ground, had finally woken up, possibly awakened by the meteorite's impact. The half-baked demon hunter rose to his feet before reaching for the back of his head with his hand and uttered, "Oh oh oi." He then sensed a burning smell in the air. ***, what happened to me? The abbreviated piece of nothing could not have woken up at a better moment. Nangong woke up and discovered himself lying on a hummock in the middle of nowhere. He rubbed the back of his head as he got on his feet. The sky was gradually turning bright. The spooky moment in the crypt was like a bad dream. He frowned as the pain in the back of his head as well as the unbearable burning smell in the atmosphere made him sick. He continued to cough and mumbled, "What happened to me?" Hao Ren signaled Vivian, Lily, and his axe to keep quiet as he smacked Nangong on the shoulder. He said, "Awake. Let's see the headline." Hao Ren. Nangong was surprised to see the three of them as well as the stranger who looked like an imposing villain. "Are you guys all right? Did the evil wraiths hurt you? Who is this gentleman? Holy moly, what's that?" Nangong finally saw the crater, which was spewing smoke and ashes. He also saw a couple of stones left near the crater. Judging from the landscape in his surroundings, he could tell it was the Yorkford Castle. However, a pit and a puddle of ever so slowly cooling lava were all that was left of the old castle after just one night. Nangong was totally dumbfounded at what had transpired. You wouldn't believe what just happened. A meteorite fell from the sky and hit the castle. It's gone just like that. Hao Ren spoke with straight face. Nangong listened with awe as he rubbed the back of his head again. Wait a second. I was fighting the evil wraiths in the crypt. There were wraith knights everywhere and you guys were right behind me. And then I felt a pain in the back of my head. That's the last thing, remember. Hao Ren acted even more sincere this time as he spoke with a trembling voice, speaking of which, I'm still shaking like a leaf. It was a miracle that we got out of that damn place alive. While you fought fearlessly in the crypt, the roof collapsed on you. You passed out and I was rooted to the spot, waiting for my final moments. Suddenly, all the wraith knights dropped down like bowling pins, lying motionless on the floor. We broke our backs trying to get you and this old man out of that hellhole. We thought of waiting for daybreak so that we could hitch a ride back home. But, this place is too creepy to stay even a second longer, so we kept running. That decision saved us all as a meteorite fell from the sky 10 minutes ago and the rest is history. Hao Ren had been pretending to be like clueless, common folk. He did not try to explain why the armored wraiths fell and lied down on the floor motionless. He did not bother to explain how on earth a meteorite could have struck the castle into a pit with surgical precision. He simply used a bizarre story to explain it, leaving Nangong to fill in the blanks. Hao Ren was being crooked. I'm just a clueless guy. Bite me. Nangong simply could not wrap his head around it, but he did not question Hao Ren. He did not suspect that the common men and two innocent maidens had anything to do with all of it. This expert was using his logic to make a conjecture. Maybe the wraiths were controlled by something larger in the crypt. Such things happened all the time in places with hundreds of years of history. That has to be the case. After all, I'm an expert. Hao Ren and Vivian spontaneously rolled their eyes in secret. Such a thick-skinned fellow. Staring regrettably at the pit of Armageddon, Nangong knew there were secrets down there, secrets which would explain why the wraith suddenly dropped to the ground and how he was saved by these three common folks. However, there was nothing left to see, let alone investigate now. Hao Ren gave his axe a grateful glance. The meteorite was seriously a Swiss Army knife. Normally during a meteorite strike, as long as the magic was not performed in plain view, you did not have to worry about the narrative. No one on this planet would ever believe that there was someone capable of bringing a rock back from the Kuiper belt. The only ones who would delve into it were astrophysicists, and this half-baked ghostbuster. Soon after, crowds of spectators from Brushire started to pour in. A few jeeps pulled up near the spot where the castle formerly stood, only to be held back by the thick smoke and strong heat of the molten space rock. In fact, people from the small town had seen the fire during his axe landing. The spectators and paranormal enthusiasts prepped their gears and departed at once from the town. However, there was northwest access road from the town to Yorkford Castle. Vehicles could only tread along the rocky terrain. Not even the best jeeps could go much faster than that. That meant the folks had only spotted the tip of the iceberg, the moment the fireball fell from the sky. Even the bravest person would not dare to head straight towards a falling meteorite. They only arrived after they waited the shock wave and explosion out. They surrounded the spot of the vanished castle and discussed among themselves. One was sending tweets out with his smartphone, one was taking a selfie in front of the crater, one was holding a ghost detector with a sad look, one was sitting on the ground and behaving hysterically, while one was proclaiming to be the Lord of Yorkford. He appeared to have something to say. This one was still energetic after a restless night. Most of the folks were shocked. These people did not have the reasoning ability of a professional. They felt like they could brag about these major events, which happened one after another near their small town. Hao Ren and the rest were ready to drop after the restless night, so they hitched a ride heading back to town. In the meantime, Nangong and the Indian monk, who was still half-conscious, the old man was indeed less fit as he took a considerably longer time to recover, were on foot. The half-baked demon hunter kept babbling, "How could it be? How could it be?" All evidence had been vaporized, not even Sherlock Holmes could have traced it back to the demon, which descended from heaven. The company arrived back in town. They could have in fact headed back to London straight away, but Vivian had another idea. She wanted to go check out the lodge owner to make sure there would be no trouble in the future. Hao Ren and Lily had no objection to that, of course. On the other hand, Isaac had been silent ever since they left Yorkford Castle, as though something was weighing on his mind. He only responded by nodding his head. Hao Ren did not bother with him, as this was only the first time they had met. They did not know each other well enough to poke their nose into each other's business. Four of them finally arrived at the little lodge at the edge of the town. Just as they had expected, the lodge owner, Angus, was not at his usual spot greeting his guests at the reception area. "Boss was sent back last night. He looked ill. I haven't seen him since then." The young lady behind the cashier counter, not from the day before, told the guests frankly. Hao Ren breathed a sigh of relief after coming out from the lodge and said, "Looks like he didn't go around telling everybody. Furthermore, he doesn't even know our true identities." However, Vivian knew better. She had dispatched her little bat to scout for him. Angus was found lying in bed with a blank stare on his face somewhere in the lodge. It seemed like the fat owner had been scared out of his wits the night before. He was probably going to be fine after some time. About the truth down there. No one was going to know about it. They eventually headed back to London. Unlike the last time, they did not book some fancy high-end hotel but checked into whatever hotel they could find. After all, they just needed a day of rest before leaving. Plus, Isaacs was waiting for his travel documents to be processed. While hanging around the hotel, Hao Ren got in contact with Raven 12345. Well, that was one heck of a mission, and Hao Ren was thoroughly spent. He never thought that he would be an intergalactic hero after living as a normal civilian for 20-odd years. Yet at his current rate, he could nary be a foot soldier, much less a hero. He managed to get a hold of Raven 12345 through the MDT. The crazy goddess had just finished gardening and was cleaning up. Hao Ren saw that she was still lugging the same giant blade she used the last time she was gardening via the holographic projection. She looked comical, like someone who just returned from a cosplay convention. Hao Ren's gaunt look was evident when he tiredly recounted the events of the past 2 days. He looked at Raven 12345 anticipatingly when he finished. "Reckon I did well in my job, eh?" Raven 12345 nodded. "You did pretty well." Hao Ren looked on in silence. He never thought Raven 12345 would give him a word of praise. "What? You want me to write you a commendation?" Raven 12345 quickly picked up the awkward stare that Hao Ren gave her. "You think crossing the globe to pick up a new tenant's a monumental task?" "Sure. Just think of what I went through," Hao Ren grumbled. "I even fought against a few hundred wraiths and ran into a wannabe demon hunter. That itself is too much of a thrill ride." Raven 12345 hesitated for a while and nodded in assent. Well, this could indeed count as exceeding expectations. Based on your stats, you're probably still a novice. Your combat strength is no more than 5, and well, your ability to hold your own despite not having much combat experience did surprise me. You know what, I'll give you something when you're back, and you just barely passed for a commendation, by the way. While you were indeed out on civilian work, it is still taken into account under the Space Administration's merit system. Hao Ren suddenly perked up with interest and wanted to ask Raven about the commendation. However, she did not seem particularly interested in the matter, so Hao Ren moved on to his next question. "Well, now that we have Isaacs, how do I get him back? I just realized something. While you have given us more than enough money to spend, Isaacs does not have a travel visa. He's only holding onto the stuff that was given to him, a Chinese identification card." Raven 12345 smacked her forehead. "Ah, so that's what it was. No wonder I felt something was missing. I only made arrangements for the 3 of you." Hao Ren felt vindicated in not placing much faith in Raven 12345. "Just hang on a bit. Isaac's visa, isn't it?" Raven 12345 did not look embarrassed at all. "The paperwork stuff is usually done by my underlings, but let me do it for you this time. Give me a moment, I'm gonna start on it now. 1, 2, 3, and done." Hao Ren was just about to turn the MDT off when he heard that Raven was going to settle the paperwork. He thought he probably would have needed to wait a day or so for it to be done. Never did he expect Raven 12345 would complete the needed procedures in a matter of seconds. She gleefully gestured for Hao Ren to put his hands out. "Stretch it out long and nice." "Yep, just like that." Hao Ren suddenly felt his arms becoming heavy, and he saw a big sack of documents lying on his outstretched arms. F***ck me, Hao Ren gawked in amazement at the speed that Raven took to complete the paperwork. Bloody hell. Is this just the baseline of what she can do? Instantaneous processing plus delivery via teleportation. Raven 12345 heard Hao Ren mumbling to himself and asked curiously, "What you saying?" Nothing, I was saying that you work fast." "Hey, very fast. Of course, I'm a goddess after all." "Well, that's that. Now that your documents are all in place, get your butts back here as soon as you can. You've already made quite a ruckus out there. Staying too long will just spell trouble." After leaving the message, Raven 12345 cut off the communication link. She sounded vaguely concerned. It was smooth sailing after that. Hao Ren and the rest thought of staying in London for another day or two to recuperate. At the very least, to rid themselves of the fatigue from the previous battle. Raven 12345's advice for them to make haste put rest to the plan. She had even bought tickets for them to depart the next day. So off they went back to China. Arriving back on home soil really did wonders for Hao Ren as he looked at the scenery of the southern suburbs. Taking a deep breath, the adventures he had in England seemed like a dream. Only the 2-meter-tall bloke beside him reminded him of the fact that it was not a dream. Hao Ren could not help but be reminded of the sorry demon hunter. They never had a chance to say hello or goodbye properly. Nangong was a special person, and having fought together, more like a bond of hitting Nangong's head with a brick, Nangong left quite an impression on him with his reckless fighting spirit. It was a pity he did not have the chance to bid farewell, as Vivian did not want to have anything to do with the man any longer than she had to, given his identity. The only cause for concern was Nangong's true identity. Whether he was a bona fide demon hunter or not, and whether he would be a source of trouble in the future, no one knew. Granted, Hao Ren and the rest managed to hide their true identities from him. They did not have much cause to believe that he knew of the matter. The meteorite had also put a stop to his investigations. He did, however, worry if Nangong would one day find out that he was the one who had rendered him unconscious. Anyway, as of then, things were fine as they were. Even if the heavens were to collapse, there was a tall guy right beside him ready to play the role of Atlas. Hao Ren felt much relief after thinking things through. In front of him was a familiar structure, his house. He quickly raised his chest and patted his axe on the shoulder. "Look, this is my house." He introduced the new tenant to his new living place. Isaacs looked on impassively, showing neither surprise nor disdain. He just calmly nodded. Peace and quiet. As long as it's peaceful and quiet, it's fine. Hao Ren looked at Isaacs in a funny way. "Hey big guy, what's with the dour mood? You looked bored throughout the journey. You spoke at times and remained completely silent at times." Isaacs gave Hao Ren a wry smile. Even with a smile, his facial expression was still rather intimidating. "It's nothing. I lived long enough and troubles are certain to follow with time. But all's good now. I'm tired of fighting as it is and I don't need any more trouble. I just want a place where I can be left alone to live my life in peace and quiet. The Space Administration promised me such a place until I get tired of it. That said, are you okay with this?" Hao Ren expressed his objection. Damn those pen pushers in the administration, doing as they please. Then, he thought of the contract he had signed with them. Shrugging it off, he said, "It's fine, I'm just the landlord. Whoever wishes to stay can stay." While this was indeed true, Hao Ren left something out. He never thought that he would be hosting a group of non-humans. The house was the way they left it. Just that dust had built up from the time they were away. It was great that Vivian had the foresight to cover most of the important furniture and electronics with sheets of cloth. It made cleaning up easy. Looking at Vivian darting about cleaning the place, Isaacs finally had a curious frown on his face. "So, that's her job here." The demon thought that he would also be required to do house chores. "Vivian's a special case." Hao Ren laughed. "She can't afford the rent, so she does housework in place, willingly. Anyway, Raven 12345 did say that you guys could claim your expenses from her." Isaacs blinked. "Looks like I still have a lot to get used to." Hao Ren smiled dryly. He thought to himself as he caught sight of Raleigh returning to the place, "Oh, you do have a lot to get used to, big guy." Isaacs would have a long and hard time understanding why a house cat was second in command of the house. It did not take long for Raleigh to show up after Hao Ren and the gang reached home. No one knew how this black cat, which was barely a meter long, had a radar-like sensory system. Not long after Hao Ren took a seat on the sofa, he heard a series of light knocks on the window facing the main road. He looked up and saw Raleigh bashing the window pane with his tail. Isaacs was watching a television series on the research of humanity when he also noticed the cat. A faint look of surprise appeared on his face. "Your cat?" Hao Ren quickly rose to open the window for Raleigh and answered without turning back. "Ah, the name's Raleigh. Don't pay too much attention to the name. Just call it that." Raleigh seemed to look much rounder even though he was supposed to be out and about with no one to care for him. No one knew how he survived the mean streets of the southern suburbs too. He jumped onto Hao Ren's shoulder without much effort and started brushing against Hao Ren's neck. He then noticed that there was a stranger in the hall and looked at Isaacs curiously. It was not the first time Raleigh had met strangers. He just never saw anyone that tall before. Surely everyone has seen a dog, but when someone runs into a giant foxhound like Charlie, their expression would have been the same. A nostalgic frown appeared on Isaac's face. A pet. I also had a kitten a long time ago. Oh, you had a cat. A mental image of a 5-meter-tall, fire demon hugging a small kitten appeared in Hao Ren's mind. The kitten was a roasted one. Isaac smiled. No, there are no cats in the demonic abyss. I just called it kitten. It was a hellhound. Even when lying down, it's about 2 heads taller than you. It has since passed on. It could have came here with me, but it refused, so. Hao Ren could not help but snicker inwards about Isaac's calling his dog kitten. By then, Lily had finished unpacking and skipped out of her room like a hyperactive bunny into the hall. The moment she saw Raleigh on Hao Ren's shoulder, she quickly stopped and greeted Raleigh with a respectful tone. She then introduced the cat to Isaac. Hey big guy. Let me introduce you to Raleigh, the number 2 of this place. I'm number 3, you're number 4, that Telly said is number 5 and Batty is last. Lily was rambling endlessly and was clearly happy that she was home after being away for so long. Like an excited puppy, she ran around the place and even managed to crack a joke with Isaac nonchalantly. Lily had a dislike towards demonkind. A pity the joke flew past Isaac's head and he looked at Hao Ren blankly. What's she saying? Just ignore her lunatic ramblings. Hao Ren laughed. Let's find Raven 1 2 3 4 5 tomorrow. Let her fix the language issue. Oh right, are you hungry? Wanna eat? Isaac just shook his head. No thanks, just tell me where my room is. I want to take a nap. We'll let you know once I'm awake. Hao Ren remembered Isaac saying that he slept most of the time since he came to Earth. And to sleep again made Hao Ren think along the lines of a familiar novel plot line. Oh I get it, you've spent too much energy traveling through dimensions and you're resting to restore your lost energy. Isaac gave Hao Ren an odd look. Why do you assume too much? It's the jet lag. Hao Ren had no answer. Come, there's an empty room upstairs. Isaac nodded and followed Hao Ren towards the stairway. Vivian suddenly shouted from the kitchen. Mr. Landlord, are you arranging a room for the big guy? I have something to discuss with you. Hao Ren looked at Vivian curiously, noticing that her face was twitching slightly. What's wrong? You can just give the big guy my room. Vivian requested. She was jittery as she thought her request would be causing trouble. I want to move to the basement. Hao Ren stared at Vivian because he misunderstood her. He quickly put on a concerned look. Look, is Lily taunting you about your rent again? Just ignore her. I'm not even bothered by it, so why should you? I can't just chase you off to the basement just because you can't pay rent. Vivian put her hand up. No, no. I don't mean that. I really want to move to the basement. The vampire pointed towards the bright sun as she went on. I've already been weakened by daylight and I need a dark, shady place to rest. While those of us who are highborn do not fear sunlight, we still prefer to avoid it if possible. I know that you gave me the room out of kindness, but at this rate my endocrine production wouldn't just go out of whack, it may even dissipate altogether. Hao Ren thought Vivian was just making things up, but she did go to the extent of listing her vampiric nature with a serious look on her face. He then knew that she really did want to move to the basement and did not question her further. He, however, had a tinge of awkwardness in his voice. The basement is spacious, I give you that. I rented out that room before, so it has water and electrical supplies. It's just that there's a whole load of junk in there and it needs a good cleaning. No worries. I can do that. Vivian looked somewhat proud. I'm just that good at making a place for myself despite the circumstances. Almost a pro at it. Hearing that and looking at Vivian's anticipation, Hao Ren felt bad for the unlucky vampire, wondering how she survived in the past. Vivian ran up and down the house cleaning, with Hao Ren lending her a hand. It did not take long before the house was spick and span again. Isaac did not carry any luggage with him and used magic to solve all his needs. He pulled whatever he needed from the void. As such, Hao Ren just needed to give him an empty room. As for Vivian, her request was even simpler. A place away from the sun, she did not even need air conditioning, she could chill the air around her easily, and that was that. The basement was about the size of the house and Hao Ren had previously rented it out. In the glory days of his business venture, he had renovated the basement. He divided the place into 2 separate rooms, one as a storeroom and the other as a small, fully furnished suite. Excluding the lack of windows, it was similar to the other rooms in the house. As there were no tenants for the past 2 years, Hao Ren had inadvertently stuffed the room with some junk. Thankfully, it was not difficult to clean the place, and after a while Hao Ren had gathered all the junk and prepared to move them to the storeroom next door. Vivian by then had came down to her new room with her small luggage. She saw Hao Ren squatting by a wooden crate and asked out of curiosity, "Mr. Landlord, moving the stuff over to the storeroom?" "Yep, we'll do that in a bit. Truthfully, none of these things have any use now, but I just can't bear to throw them away. These are stuff from my childhood." Hao Ren looked nostalgically at the items in the wooden box. "Those were pretty rad stuff when I was a kid. Even fought with the neighbor's son for them. Look how worn out they've become." Vivian scratched her head. "They look new to me." Hao Ren almost choked himself. Recounting nostalgia with an old hag, who used an old antique as an amulet of protection, was just asking for his pride to be wounded. Vivian saw the awkward look on Hao Ren's face and quickly changed the topic, pointing towards the items in the box for their stories. "This is the lunchbox I used when I was in junior high. This is the game console from when I was a kid. It used cartridges like this. I kept breaking the outer cover apart and just jammed the circuit board into the machine. God, it felt high-tech back then. And this is the schoolwork from the guy who sat next to me in class. Wait, the F***ck is this thing doing here? And oh, half of a $1 note. I had always wondered when I would pick up the other half when I first saw this note." Hao Ren regaled the tales of his childhood items to Vivian. Each item seemed like a treasure to him. He even managed to surprise himself at times. Vivian listened on intently. The two, who had a gap of at least hundreds of generations, were talking about Hao Ren's childhood items excitedly. That was until Hao Ren pulled out a metal object from the box. It was in the shape of a diamond. Vivian's eyes widened. "This. I don't even know where it came from." Hao Ren totally missed the change in Vivian's expression and played with the object in his hand. "It looks like a handicraft from somewhere. No one knows what the inscription means." Hao Ren was fiddling with the metallic object in his hand like a normal toy. There was nothing particularly special about it. It was a diamond-shaped metal piece, the size of a palm. It looked like a metal wedge on a rusty old farming tool. It was black with a tinge of gray and the surface was wrought with marks of wear and tear. One part of it was particularly smooth, with wavy lines arrayed across the surface. They looked almost identical to the character that represents elephants in old Chinese script. Hao Ren was pretty sure it was just another piece of metal. He tried to use a magnet on the thing. "Let me have a look." Vivian grabbed the object. Her voice had a tinge of concern in it. She played around with the object, trying to discern its origins. Looking at her actions, Hao Ren asked curiously, "You've seen this before?" "I'm not very sure, but it does look familiar," Vivian frowned. "Not exactly the same object, but I've seen the markings on the surface before." "Where did you get it?" "I don't know," Hao Ren ruffled his hair. "I do remember having this when I was very young, around 4 or 5. Back then, I was a brat. I could remember it being missing from my toy box. I remember clearly that I picked it up somewhere and I treated it like treasure. Just couldn't bear to throw it out." Vivian clearly looked unsatisfied with Hao Ren's response. She held the metal piece tightly and brushed her finger against the marking. It took her a good couple of minutes before she recalled something. "I remember seeing this symbol. It's been a very, very long time ago. At least 1,000 years ago, give or take. I don't remember the details though. You know how it is with me and my memory. I can't recall anything too far back." Hao Ren gulped. He totally missed what Vivian said except the part about 1,000 years. He yelped excitedly. "You mean, this is a piece of antique? 1,000-year-old antique?" Vivian rolled her eyes. "Well, you could try selling it at the antique fair." Hao Ren laughed awkwardly. He knew his old habits had emerged again and they left the subject at that. He stored the metal piece back in the box carefully. Valuable or not, it did not really matter when it gave an old hag like Vivian a scare. That itself was golden. The both of them continued cleaning the basement. There was not much junk to begin with, and Hao Ren cleaned the place rather frequently, so it only took a moment before they were done with it and all the junk was moved to the storeroom next door. They also took the chance to clean out whatever useless junk that should have been discarded years ago. Within a few moments, the basement had turned into a clean, new bedroom. It came furnished with the necessary furniture, it even had an internet port, and best of all, it was devoid of the sunlight, which Vivian hated. There was only a small window in the western part of the wall, half buried in the house's layer of foundation. Only by dusk did rays of light permeate through the window port. It suited Vivian perfectly. Hao Ren still felt bad about letting a pretty lass like Vivian, please remember that vampires are eternally 17, stay in the basement. However, seeing that the room had become spick and span, he did not feel as guilty as before. Most importantly, Vivian looked extremely pleased. She even dusted off the dirt that had gathered on Hao Ren's shirt during the course of the cleaning. "Mr. Landlord, you're too kind. No one has treated me this nicely before." That other time. Well, it would have been centuries before Vivian would finish recounting her sob stories. All we need to know is, Lily finally felt like she had found paradise after living in hardship and poverty for about 1,000 years. Surprisingly, Vivian was easily satisfied, and that was a plus point. It made her an easy person to support. Isaacs, on the other hand, took a few days to get used to his new life. So did Vivian, who was the home chef. She had to contend with two big eaters at home. The first one being Lily, who could wolf down 3 bowls of noodles in one go. Hao Ren noticed that new tenant seemed to be getting along well with the rest. The demon was a content creature and had a surprisingly good temper as opposed to the stereotype. This at least reassured Hao Ren that his life would not become even more haywire than it already was. Heaven knows, with Vivian and Lily around, another tenant with a grumpy mood would have probably sent Hao Ren sleeping on the streets. With everything in the household settled for the moment, Hao Ren moved on to the most pertinent matter at hand, meeting Raven 1 2 3 4 5. They had not met for a good few days, and Hao Ren had even more questions to ask now. Hao Ren took off to Bastard Barrio the next morning in the usual rickety bus. After a while, he got off near the grand-looking place, Heaven's Office on Earth, or HO for short. Raven 12345's luxurious mansion looked the same as it always had, perpetually stuck in a pocket of space and time where it was eternally a misty dawn. Around the perimeter, a cloud of seemingly impenetrable mist swirled about. At times, Hao Ren wanted to see what was beyond the mist. Perhaps he could have seen what heaven looked like. It never actually happened though, and Hao Ren did not have the guts to even bring it up to Raven 1 2 3 4 5. Who knows, the crazy goddess may not have taken too kindly to his curiosity and proceeded to off him right on the spot. A cerulean elemental slave led Hao Ren to Raven 12345's office. Upon opening the door, he saw the goddess focusing on a holographic image floating above her desk. A frown appeared from time to time, followed by a look of deep thought. Hao Ren was surprised. He never thought Raven 1 2 3 4 5 would have a serious moment while working. By then, Raven 1 2 3 4 5 sensed that someone had entered her office. She looked up and greeted Hao Ren loudly. "Yo, Hao Ren. Haven't seen you for a while. Looking fine there, I see. Got rid of your jet lag already?" "Oh, I'm okay." Hao Ren just could not take the goddess seriously enough to treat her with reverence. As time passed, his attitude towards her had transformed into something like running into a superior in office. "I'm here to hold your horses. I need you to give me a full AAR of the mission." Raven 1 2 3 4 5 waved her hands. "The stuff you told me the other day was too brief. I can't write a report with that." "Oh, that was just bloody rich." A goddess needing to submit a report. Hao Ren cleared his throat and recounted what happened in England 2 days ago. He also made mention of the wraiths beneath Yorkford Castle and Nangong, the demon hunter. He felt that they were the biggest surprises of the mission and thought they were worth the mention. Raven 1 2 3 4 5 hesitated for a moment after listening to Hao Ren's account of the events. She asked, "What do you think was the biggest obstacle during the mission?" Hao Ren looked down thoughtfully and finally spoke, "My mortal body. I seriously can't deal with this god-forsaken job. I mean, I need some sort of combat or survival ability. I almost died trying to keep up with Lily in the crypt. Most of the time, I wasn't even fighting the creeps. It was more like me trying not to get beaten up by them. I could have seriously died from that. The strengthening of the body did work, but it's not sufficient to keep me alive. Maybe try not to give me such a doomed mission. That was one of the easiest missions around. The others to negotiate a peace treaty in Mintaka. You're up for that. Raven 12345 rolled her eyes. But it's true that you do need to strengthen your body. Conditioning will only give you the basics, but combat prowess requires training. How about this? I'll give you. Hao Ren quickly interjected before Raven 12345 could finish her sentence. You're giving me a secret skill compendium, isn't it? There's actually something like that. He. Raven 12345 glanced at Hao Ren. You've been reading too many fantasy novels. Do you think that you'll be invincible with just the skill compendium? Even that takes time to master. Most people take months to even get the spell casting sequence of a fireball right. A high-level spell would require an even more complex mathematical algorithm. Do you think this is a game? Double-clicking a skill book is gonna allow you to shoot frost bolts from your hands. Good luck with that. You think that someone who moans at a simple mathematical equation can survive studying a tome of forbidden spells? The first chapter itself would probably put you to tears. So, do you still want the secret skill compendium? Hao Ren could only look on in silence. Ever since Hao Ren knew Raven 12345, there was never any good news from the woman. Somehow, she just had a negative vibe to her. Whenever something exciting happened, Raven 12345 would definitely discourage him, including the leakage about the secret skill compendium. Hao Ren did not say a word. Raven 12345 thought the heavy blow on Hao Ren was not hurtful enough and kept on nagging. No pain, no gain. You need to learn, to keep practicing it in order to master it. There is no skill on earth that you can master easily in a day or two. There is no fast track. It all takes time to learn and practice. You can't even memorize a simple mathematical formula. How do you expect yourself to memorize more than 20 lines of runes in the other world? Do you think you'll have the strength to lift a dragon sword if you can't even handle a 200-meter run? You can't handle simple and easy things on Earth. Even if you travel to a magical land, you'll still just be a poor student there. I knew a fool before. He kept lamenting about the injustice in his life. The main reason he thought he was an unsuccessful laborer was that he lived in a dull world. He didn't get the chance to encounter a story-like adventure. I was holding a great bargain of wishes that time. So, I fulfilled his wish and turned him back into a 6-year-old. I sent him to the best magic school in Bantuin land. The guy was still a poor student in the other world, and today he's still a laborer. Therefore, don't be impatient. Take one step at a time. I'll arrange a training program for you. It's tough, but you won't die. You can slowly grow accustomed to your body changes and temper your mental. You see, you've taken a shortcut compared to other people. You just need to train your mind. I can directly improve your physical and special abilities via physical enhancement. My only request is that you train your mind to be able to control your own power. Think about those unlucky kids who have to run 5,000 meters, do 50 push-ups and swim 2 kilometers every day. They even have to count their calorie intake for every meal. And look at the good physique you have. You could beat the boxers in illegal, underground matches now. You should be happy, she added. Raven 12345's words silenced him. He suddenly realized that the unreliable goddess probably had a conscientious side after all. Though she was always careless, undignified, sloppy, and had stains of last week's instant noodle soup on her desk, she was still a good goddess. At least she would not just improve people's strength and leave them. She would support them from behind carefully and think everything through for her inexperienced, new employees. To be frank, Hao Ren was a little moved. That was until Raven 12345 grabbed a little pill out of nowhere. Come on, eat this. I knew you would keep talking about your combat strength when you came back. I've already prepared this for you, Raven whispered softly and smiled. Hao Ren remembered how his mother tricked him into taking medicine the same way. What is it? Hao Ren jumped back right away and lowered his body a little to defend himself. This little pill lets you see the real world. Don't be funny. The punchline from the Matrix is already out of date, okay? Nobody remembers it now. Raven 12345 moved and appeared right before Hao Ren in a flash. She held his mouth open and threw the little pill in. Just eat it like a man. This is an armament issued by the Space Administration, specially prepared for newbies who pass the initial task. Hao Ren lowered his guard after he heard the last sentence. He then chewed the pill and swallowed it. It tastes sour. What the heck is this for? Sour. Raven 12345 was stunned for a few seconds. Then she patted her head and took another pill from her pocket. Oh, I got the wrong one. This is the pill for you. Don't worry. You can't die from taking the wrong pill. This pill can leave an imprint in your mind and reinforce your mental state through brain symbiosis. This is the Ministry of Military's latest invention. Previously it was only for the army, but recently, they started giving it to agents as well. The pill will take effect soon. Although you can't feel it, it will effectively prevent you from going brain dead as a result of all sorts of accidents, as well as help you fight against mental shock. The human species is too weak. If you don't strengthen your mental power, you can't even use our common gear. How do you feel, by the way? Hao Ren refused to talk about the wrong pill and shuddered as he took the second pill. His forehead started to sweat and he asked, brain symbiosis. Why does it sound scary? Yes, some species show resistance when confronted with this device, especially the standard Type 3 human. Raven 12345 was not surprised at Hao Ren's response and continued explaining, you're instinctively afraid of something that sounds like a parasite. However, this isn't a parasite. It's a reinforcing piece. It's a lifeless mini device. Just like soldiers who wear external armor, this mini device is the armor of your mind. It provides you with double reinforcement from body to soul. It's not unpleasant when you think of it this way, right? Hao Ren accepted her explanation and ignored the vague sense of discomfort that loomed deep down in his heart as usual. He would discover the value of the little pill he just ate, in the future. Raven 12345 looked at Hao Ren with satisfaction. She seemed optimistic about his composure. Shortly after, she went back to her desk. She adjusted her posture to appear serious and said, the new employment insurance has been sent to you. Now let's discuss the questions regarding your intensive training. Things like the secret skill compendium don't really work. However, I know of a good training ground, the only one of its kind in this world. It's not easy to find a place like this anywhere else. Hao Ren's ears perked up and he asked, where is it? Go home and have a dream. Train in the plane of dreams. Raven 12345 smirked and said, you can live alone in the wild or find a place where people gather. Use your brain to find ways to survive. The former helps you learn to face danger, the latter helps you learn to adapt to an unfamiliar environment with strangers. These two skills are a must as an agent. Hao Ren was immediately reminded of the giant wolf in his nightmare a few nights ago. While he had the experience of dealing with armored wraiths in the crypt, he could not forget the choking feeling in his neck. His breathing slowed down immediately and he asked, the plane of dreams. Didn't you tell me not to touch that stuff? You said it's dangerous there. Raven 12345 rolled her eyes and said, because that time you were just a dumb newbie. Now, you're a newbie. So, you can go and train in the plane of dreams now. It's just a twisted place that's linked to the real world. The physical parameters are the same as the superficial world. It's not going to kill you. Thus, it'll be a good fit for you. Of course, if you don't want to, I can arrange another place for you. There's a new recruit training ground in the Grand Trine Galaxy. You'll be teaming up with more than 200 men to kill 30,000 beasts. Hao Ren suddenly stood up. With a determined look on his face, he said, the plane of dreams, is it? For the sake of world peace, I'll do it. Stop trembling when you say it then if you really dare to go. Hao Ren was quiet. Don't worry, you won't die, Raven said as she smiled. Why did I give you the little pill just now? The pill's most important function is to protect your brain and your soul, to prevent them from dying. As long as you're not physically inside the plane of dreams, you won't die in that place. The worst thing that will happen to you is waking up from the nightmare and peeing yourself. Hao Ren was sweating. As a goddess, can't you talk a little more gracefully? Oh, you're gonna drown in bed and wake up from all the fear. Hao Ren was speechless. Just as Hao Ren was about to touch on the graceful issue again and ask Raven how he could consciously enter the plane of dreams, someone suddenly pushed the door open. A blue elemental servant bowed respectfully at the door and uttered a muffled, deep sound that no one could understand. Raven 12345 got up immediately and replied, "Oh, I'll be back. I have something for you. Wait here." As soon as she finished, the goddess disappeared in a flash and left Hao Ren there, completely confused. Hao Ren did not know what was happening, but he was too afraid to leave as well. After wandering around the room, he found something that made him curious. Raven 12345 was examining something similar to the MDT on her desk earlier on. The device was still on and a holographic projection floated above it. Hao Ren slowly wandered over and thought, just a peek. It should be fine, right? Just a little peek should be okay. Hao Ren kept looking around like a thief. It was as though the room was full of cameras. He muttered to himself as he walked towards Raven 12345's desk. He wondered what was above the goddess's MDT. Curiosity was part of his human nature. Though he felt like it was something boring, he could not help himself. When he saw the projection, he found that it looked like a forum page. The text on the page was not in human language. However, with the MDT's seamless translation, the text could be fully understood. City of Shadows Community Chat Room was written on the top of the page. He remembered City of Shadows being the capital of Xiling Empire. Mortals also perceived it as the supreme realm of the gods. Hao Ren could feel a solemn vibe the moment he read the title. He was then shocked by the topic of the first thread, which was posted at the top of the page. I was transferred to a primitive universe to be a god recently. How do I pretend to be an experienced god? Waiting on the line urgently, Raven 12345, via the magic type data terminal, posted 30 minutes ago. The post of Hao Ren's unreliable female boss had gathered more than 230 likes. It was pinned at the top of the forum. Hao Ren silently walked away and sat back on his seat. He buried his head in his hands and wondered what would happen if Raven 12345 found out he had read the post. Would the crazy goddess get angry and kill him in seconds? Anyway, Hao Ren's unrealistic view of the Space Administration collapsed at this point. Although he knew that the Space Administration was a terrible behemoth, it was even more horrible that a cadre of deputy-leveled officers could destroy the entire Milky Way in seconds. However, he also knew that the big bosses who had the power to destroy the galaxy were basically not free to harm humans. He knew this from Raven 12345. Just look at what the psycho does every day. While Hao Ren's imagination was running wild, a glowing blue vortex suddenly appeared in the room. Raven 12345 was back. It startled Hao Ren. However, she did not seem to realize that Hao Ren had just peeked at her data terminal. Raven 12345 was holding a crystal chip about the size of a matchbox in her hand. She passed it to Hao Ren and said, "Take it. Keep it well. It'll be useful in the future." "What is this?" Hao Ren was a little immune to the variety of strange and high-tech gadgets issued by the Space Administration. He just asked out of curiosity and was not easily amazed or impressed by the high-tech devices like before. "The key to the spacecraft and also your training card as a trainee pilot," replied Raven 12345. The tone of her voice sounded like she was lending someone half an eraser. Hao Ren took the crystal chip. After he heard what she had said, he began to tremble like he was holding on to burning iron. He nearly dropped the seemingly fragile crystal to the ground. He could not help but be astounded by the chip on his hand and asked, "What did you say?" "Spaceship." "Yes, spaceship." Raven 12345 nodded as she spoke. "Why are you so surprised? There are countless universes under the Space Administration and the world I manage covers a range of 30 billion light-years. As the only certified god throughout 30 billion light-years, do you think that I would choose a spokesperson just to see him struggle on the Earth? Do you think every god is a miniaturist?" Hao Ren's brain tingled as he held the crystal chip. He gulped and asked, "Let me figure it out." "You mean, I have to learn to pilot a spaceship? That's too big a task for me." "Don't worry. You still can't learn it for the time being. Your spaceship has not been approved yet. I just applied for an anti-theft lock. Hao Ren was speechless once again. How did her mind work? Was it a complete mess? Hao Ren confirmed several times with Raven 1 2 3 4 5 and finally felt ensured that he did not have to think about problems concerning the spaceship or outer space yet. The crazy goddess had really just applied for a spaceship core lock. This was completely meaningless. It felt like ordering a security door before buying a house. What was the point? Was he supposed to poke the key into the keyhole every day to fulfill a psychological sense of accomplishment? According to Raven 1 2 3 4 5, even the spaceship's core lock had not been sent over from the factory. She got the key directly from the workshop and did not know the purpose of giving it to Hao Ren this early. Hao Ren totally could not communicate with this confusing and psychotic woman. Is there anything else? Raven 1 2 3 4 5 did not care about how her strange logic had confused others. She patted Hao Ren's shoulder like nothing ever happened and said, "If there's nothing else, I will continue my work. My post got so many likes for the first time in my life." Hao Ren instinctively nodded and left the room. Luckily, he remembered the questions he wanted to ask before he stepped out of the door and said, "Wait. There's one last thing." Raven 1 2 3 4 5 looked at Hao Ren curiously and he quickly seized the opportunity to ask the questions he almost forgot about. "I found something. The magic didn't work for me. The blood magic Vivian used to remove the curse didn't work on me. It was the same for her blood. And the letter runes in England were." Hao Ren told her all about the unusual situations he encountered. He did not think that this immunity against the spells was also one of the Space Administration's welfare programs. If there was a benefit, Raven 1 2 3 4 5 would have told him in advance. Although the goddess was a psycho, it was unlikely of her to make a mistake on this issue. More importantly, the phenomenon first appeared before Hao Ren was physically enhanced. At that time he was still a thoroughly ordinary person. Therefore, the ability to be immune to spells must have been something strange. After listening to Hao Ren's description, a rare expression of seriousness appeared on her face. She looked at Hao Ren up and down until it gave him the creeps. Immune to the vampire's blood magic and blood perfusion. Immune to the influence of letter runes. Your body can also directly cancel out the effect of letter runes. Anything else? Asked Raven 1 2 3 4 5. Hao Ren tensed up when he saw Raven 12345's expression. He guessed that his situation was unusual. He did not expect his situation to make the careless goddess look grim. He thought it over, firmly shook his head and said, "That's it. And I've never been in contact with any other sort of magic. Anyway, I'm immune to these types of magic. Do you think I was born immune to all kinds of magic? This isn't natural." Raven 1 2 3 4 5 dropped a bunch of sparks on Hao Ren. "You think too much," she said. Half a minute later, Hao Ren recovered from a temporary state of paralysis. His face was full of resentment. "How can you just do whatever you like to me? So, I'm not immune to magic, huh?" "Not exactly, you will be immune to certain parts of the magic but, I'm not sure specifically which part." "I need to investigate it," said Raven 1 2 3 4 5 as she frowned. "This may also be a hereditary problem but, don't you worry. At least, it's harmless. Can you tell me more?" Hao Ren guessed that Raven 1 2 3 4 5 knew something about it. He immediately moved close to her and said, "After all, this happened to me. At least I have the right to know. The problem is I'm not sure and now, I can only roughly guess that it could be related to the plane of dreams." Raven 1 2 3 4 5 gazed into Hao Ren's eyes. She did not look like she was lying. Certain changes normally happen to people who have entered the plane of dreams. However, most of them are dangerous mutations and those affected usually die within a few days. You on the other hand, are immune to certain magic after waking up from it. It's a special case. I have to investigate further before coming to a conclusion. It's related to the plane of dreams again. Hao Ren was finally interested in that mysterious and dangerous place. "What the heck, how? Why don't you just go and have a look at it?" said Raven 1 2 3 4 5. She smiled mysteriously. "You've only been there once so you're still far from knowing the truth of that space. I won't tell you too much. Just go and figure it out by yourself." Again, you're just telling me half of the story, Hao Ren muttered. This is the only part of you that's similar to the deities in the fairy tales. Oh yes, there's one last thing. Hao Ren almost forgot the most important question and quickly blurted, can you solve my tenants' language problem? Vivian and Lily are unable to communicate with people in England. Isaacs doesn't even speak human language. The big demon is now holding the primary one-language book and learning pronunciation all day. The werewolf, vampire, and demon rely on sign language and hieroglyphs to communicate with each other. If they keep going on like this, I really don't know how to face Hollywood and Chidian. Raven 12345 immediately gave him a brilliant smile and said, that's simple. I've discussed your special situation with my superior. I can provide your tenants with limited civilian device support. You can bring them over in 2 days. I'll use the bioenhancement and reconfiguration chamber to install the language directly into their mind. You also need to install it, by the way. Then you won't have to go through the data terminal every time you need a translation. Hao Ren thought for a moment and finally realized something was wrong. He then said, wait. You mean I have to lie in that coffin again? A smile blossomed on her face and she said, yes. Hao Ren spent most of the day at Raven 12345's office. It was almost evening when he returned home. Just as he turned around the corner of the street, he saw Lily waiting there. She was standing on her toes at the door, looking towards Hao Ren's direction. She looked like a puppy that was left alone at home by its owner. Hao Ren had already gotten used to this scene. When Lily saw Hao Ren, she quickly ran up to him excitedly and asked, landlord, you're finally back. What are we eating tonight? Will you have some dignity as a werewolf, please? Hao Ren sighed and passed a bag of food to Lily. It's the big ribs you love. We need to cook them in a stew first tonight. Then you'll have rib noodles by noon tomorrow. After half a month of getting along, Hao Ren had completely mastered Lily's temperament. The werewolf's preference was easy to guess. She was happy as long as she got to eat delicious food. 2 of her favorite dishes were stewed ribs made by Vivian and noodles made by Hao Ren. Well, it was easy to understand why she loved ribs. They are meat but, noodles. Do werewolves even eat noodles? No one could figure out how Lily turned into an omnivore. It was a good thing anyway. It was easier to keep omnivorous animals. If Lily needed to eat 20 kilograms of fresh meat every day like normal werewolves, the butcher would have probably not been able to cope even if Hao Ren could have afforded it. Lily carried the ribs and happily ran back to the house to look for Vivian. Lily would only say something nice to Vivian for food. Where was her pride as a werewolf? Hao Ren was speechless as he watched Lily follow Vivian into the kitchen. After locking the door, he turned around and saw a huge man sitting in the middle of the living room. The giant, Isaacs, was too obvious to ignore. With his height of 2.15 meters, he would have definitely attracted many unwanted attention no matter where he went. Not to mention that antisocial and demonic look of his. It was a big problem taking him out. Hao Ren went to market to buy some food with Isaacs 2 days ago. However, not long after they left the house, an old lady had already called the police. So, you see. Isaacs did not notice that Hao Ren was back. He was sitting on the sofa, studying a Chinese dictionary attentively. The dictionary looked like a booklet in his hands. He could only pinch it with a few fingers to keep it in his hands. Looking at the serious look on his big and fierce face, Hao Ren found it really funny. Why was a good-tempered man born with such a fierce face? How's it going? Hao Ren was curious. He moved closer to Isaacs and took a look at what he was holding. Hao Ren found that the demon actually jotted down some crooked symbols in the dictionary, which looked like demon text. Hao Ren was moved by the demon's hard-working spirit but also a little embarrassed at himself. The dictionary had been abandoned in his home for more than 4 years. He could not compare with Isaacs in terms of hard work. Oh, you're back, Isaacs looked at Hao Ren as he spoke in a low, muffled voice. Demon language sounded like a tape being played backwards. It had strange pronunciation and a vague tone. It was hard to discern and came up just behind Japanese English. Vivian and Lily did not learn a word during the past 2 days, so Hao Ren became the only one in the family who could communicate normally with Isaacs. The giant demon knew that was the case too, hence, he was happy to see Hao Ren. Finally, I can chat with someone. Is everything okay? Things are pretty good. Raven 12345 explained and cleared the confusion. How's your learning progress been these 2 days? Chinese is so difficult. Isaac lost his spirit and threw the dictionary away. The giant demon could not seem to handle it. I think it's more difficult than Elvish. I can't figure out these 4 words, pits, holes, caves and tiny holes even after learning them for 2 days. How exactly did you learn this language? This made Hao Ren sweat. These 4 words are difficult enough to stop 80% of students from coming to China. Forget about them. I wanted to tell you that Raven 12345 has applied for something new from her superiors. It'll be able to help you solve your language problem. I'll bring you to meet her along with Vivian and Lily in 2 days. All of you need to do is undergo a small surgery, and then you'll have a translation package in your head. Hao Ren observed Isaac's expression and wanted to see how the giant demon reacted to the small surgery. He had impression that not many boss-leveled creatures were willing to let others touch them. However, Hao Ren was disappointed to see nothing from Isaac's face. He just nodded and said, "Oh yes, I should meet the goddess to say hello too." Then, you have to be mentally prepared, Hao Ren kindly reminded. Don't get angry when she wants you to lie down inside strange things. I know what you mean. Isaac had a scary grin. Something that looks like a coffin, right? Most of the coffins in the world look the same, and most equipment made by the Shiling Celestials look like coffins as well. I've tried it before. Hao Ren was lost for words. Dinner's ready. As Hao Ren and Isaac were discussing the inspiration behind the coffin-like equipment in the Shiling Empire, Vivian's voice suddenly rang from the kitchen, pulling the 2 men out of their gossip session. Vivian carried an electric cooker and walked to the living room, followed by Lily, who was wagging her tail happily. They were also followed by an arrogant-looking Raleigh. The 3 of them looked proud of themselves. Before Hao Ren and Isaac sat down, Vivian pointed towards the direction of the kitchen and commanded, "Wash your hands." Isaac could not understand what Vivian said, but he got the meaning from her hand gestures and direction of her finger. So, the big demon stood up and obediently ran to the kitchen to wash his hands, leaving Hao Ren amazed in the back. Vivian would have a domineering vibe right after she finished the housework. She was not scared of the demon and dared to shout at him. Hao Ren thought that the vampire had probably figured out how to be a housewife. Well, it was good. The evening meal was light and simple. It included rice, porridge, steamed bread, and 2 vegetable dishes. This was quite enough for them, and the portion was big enough to fill Lily and Isaac's big appetite. Vivian's cooking skills were unquestionable. As an ancient creature who had been wandering the world for centuries, she was familiar with all kinds of cooking methods on the planet. She even knew how to roast a saber-toothed tiger. If not because of its extinction, Hao Ren believed his daily meals would have been abundantly unprecedented. Lily inserted her chopsticks into 2 steamed buns and chewed them quickly like eating candied haws on a stick. She scrunched up her nose and looked towards the kitchen. As she gnawed on the buns, she said, "I want to eat the ribs." It's still cooking. Vivian was probably still in housewife mode. She spoke to Lily in a relaxed tone. It has to cook in the stew for at least 3 hours. I have my own principles when it comes to rib stew. Hao Ren rolled his eyes and thought, can she apply principles in the right place? Everyone was busy eating. While Hao Ren was about to look for the remote control to turn on the TV, a sudden crack broke the calm atmosphere in the living room. It was Lily. She was holding a small plate in her hands. She had wanted to take more food, but the small plate was squeezed into pieces and the ceramic scattered all over the table. Hao Ren was stunned, whereas Vivian shouted at her. "Doggy, can't you have a little patience? You just had to wait and eat the meat tomorrow. Was it necessary to get angry over it? It's landlord's bowl." "No. I didn't mean to." Lily was frightened as well. She quickly cleaned up the broken dish on the table as she nervously glanced at Hao Ren. "Landlord, I didn't mean it. I don't know what's wrong with me. I can't control myself all of a sudden." Then, there was another crack. Before Lily could finish her sentence, she crushed a bowl in her hand again. Just as Vivian was about to scold Lily, Hao Ren realized that Lily was not behaving normally. He quickly waved his hand to stop Vivian and said, "Something isn't right. Look at Lily's eyes." Lily was in her werewolf. She was usually in human form when at home. For no reason she had transformed into a werewolf and her golden eyes appeared brighter than usual. Her eyes were so bright that they were slightly glowing. "Lily, your hands seem to be shaking." Hao Ren finally saw Lily's hands. He sensed that something bad was about to happen. Lily's hands trembled, but she did not realize it until the others pointed it out. Meanwhile, the ceramics in her hands had turned into powder. She seemed to have lost control. I don't know what's happening," Lily waved her hands nervously. "I didn't do it." So many questions were on his mind, but when he saw how nervous Lily was, he calmed himself down. "Just stay calm. Don't move, Vivian, you know what's going on, don't you?" Vivian noticed something. Lily's eyes were unusually bright. She seemed to have entered into a state of excitement. "Did you eat something you were not supposed to? An analeptic perhaps?" Lily was almost in tears. "No. Just a bun in the afternoon. I was so run down just now because of hunger." Hao Ren had to stop eating midway. Not only were Lily's hands shaking, her body was quivering as if she had lost control of her muscles. Hao Ren stepped forward and held the werewolf maiden in his arms. "Let's move over to the sofa. Just relax." As Hao Ren helped Lily over to the sofa, he noticed something once again. Her muscles were stiff. He felt like he was holding a heavy, steel bar. Lily heard him, but she shook her head. "I can't relax. If I do, I'll lose control. Landlord, please stay away. I'm afraid I'll inadvertently fling you away." "Oops. See what I mean?" With just the slightest movement of her arm, Hao Ren was flung away like he was hit by a speeding lorry. His body flew and crashed into Vivian, who was standing nearby. It brought them both to the floor. Lily was terrified seeing what had just happened. She wanted to give them a hand, but she was trembling uncontrollably. She stood where she was and slowly leaned herself on the sofa. While she placed her hand on the sofa's armrest to support herself, she accidentally punctured a large hole in it. Hao Ren and Vivian got up from the floor awkwardly. Hao Ren's bio-enhanced body saved himself from a 2-week vacation in the hospital. The duo carefully approached the werewolf maiden. Lily huddled herself on one end of the sofa. She lay still, afraid that even the slightest exhale from her nostrils would blow the house away. A sudden loss of control and mild hysteria. "She's conscious though," as the only one there who understood werewolves, Vivian offered her half-baked, medical expertise. She made sure Lily did not move a muscle before she went up close to check on her eyes. "There is slight bleeding under the conjunctiva. Please open your mouth so that I can see your tongue. Are you sure you didn't eat anything weird?" Lily shook her head, crying out, "No, I swear. I don't know anything." The werewolf maiden became desperate. She had never been under the weather. In fact, she never even had bruises. She was a virgin in terms of sickness. Plus, her timid nature did not prepare her well. She was scared out of her wits. Hao Ren could only stand by. It was Vivian's show now. "Do you know how to treat a werewolf?" Hao Ren asked. "Not a clue." Vivian shook her head in complete honesty. "But you checked her eyes and tongue like a pro." Vivian looked away. "I realized that I don't know how to treat her after my attempt to diagnose." "Then, what should we do now?" Hao Ren spread out his hands. "Send her to the hospital." Vivian pointed her finger at Lily's ears and tail. "In your opinion, what kind of hospital should we send her to? What kind of doctor will be able to treat her?" Hao Ren pondered for a long while before he felt a real need to send Lily to a veterinarian. Yes, a veterinarian. Hao Ren smacked his head. "How could I not think of it? Aren't you a veterinarian yourself, Lily?" The werewolf maiden slammed her hand on the sofa's backrest and said, "Yes, but I've only treated dogs. I'm a werewolf, mind you. I can't treat myself." "Oops. I'm sorry, the sofa." Hao Ren took a quick glance at the broken backrest, but he had no time to be angry. He turned his hopeful eyes to the last person in the house. "Isaacs, any idea?" Isaacs just shook his head. There is no such creature as the werewolf in the demonic abyss. And I'm not a doctor. Hao Ren told Lily what Isaacs had said. She instantly became dejected. What am I supposed to do now? Could this be an incurable disease? Batty, do you know what werewolves do when they're sick? You've seen enough werewolves to be able to tell, right? Vivian had an odd expression on her face. When werewolves are sick, they'll normally have a feast. Everyone was speechless. Don't talk like it doesn't concern you. Lily exploded in anger and her tail puffed up. This is all your fault. Ever since you yanked that red moon out, I've been having a bad feeling. Today. Wait a second. Hao Ren chimed in all of a sudden. Did you just say red moon? What red moon? It happened the day we first met the giant, Lily said as she compressed her lips. Since Batty conjured up that strangely huge, red moon, I've been feeling awful for days. It's all Batty's fault. By then, Hao Ren had also recalled it in his memory. He could never forget the majestic scene where the demonic sea of fire and blood red moon faced off in the sky. However, he did not give it much thought then. He only felt that being as low-key as she was, Vivian had pulled off something worthwhile during her confrontation with Isaacs, the demon. As for the red moon, he had no idea what to make of it. Lily, however, reacted to the red moon. Does it really have something to do with the moon? Hao Ren looked at Vivian, expecting her to retort. Instead, she nodded hesitantly. I'm afraid it seems so. The blood moon has influence over many creatures. I used it once a long time ago and the blood moon almost caused the entire werewolf tribe to go crazy. That night, I had used restraint. Doggy should only be experiencing some discomfort at the most and there shouldn't be any after effect. She seemed just fine the last couple of days. The effects should have been gone as soon as the blood moon disappeared. Hey, we could got to Raven 1 2 3 4 5 for answers. Just when everybody was at a loss of what to do, the idea of outside help crossed Hao Ren's mind. She's the one who asked me to look after all of you. So it's only natural that I should refer to her about what's happening here. Vivian, I need your help. We'll take Lily to Raven now. No, not now. Not until daybreak. Vivian stopped Hao Ren as she pointed her finger towards the window. 4 days to go before full moon. I'm afraid if we take her out under the moon, her condition would worsen. Or, she could go on a rampage because the moon still affects her. So, the problem now is how do we make it through the night? Hao Ren nodded as his eyes rested on Lily again. Her shivers had stopped but her hands were still shaking severely. A golden glow emanated from Lily's muddy eyes. The glow made everyone nervous. Lily, are you awake? The werewolf maiden nodded lightly. I'm okay. Nonetheless, Hao Ren was still worried. So he asked, 1,999 plus 100 equals 2,000. Not good. Her mind still blurry. Vivian smacked Hao Ren on the shoulder. Bullshit. She gets it wrong all the time. That's just how she is. Despite their best efforts, Vivian and Hao Ren arrived at nothing. At last, Isaacs broke the silence and came up with an idea. I think first of all, we need to stop her from moving. She's lost control of herself. Her destructive movements could injure others. Maybe, we can tie her up with a rope or chain. Save your trouble. Hao Ren sighed. She can snap a chain the size of a bowl with one hand. She has no special skills. Her only advantage is her incredible, brute strength. Isaac spread his arms. Then, knock her out. Not even a 10-ton rock could scratch her one bit. Hao Ren looked at Isaacs. Maybe you could. Isaacs waved his hands vehemently. No, I'm not doing it. It's a matter of principle. Hao Ren almost jumped on him. Is that necessary? I mean, you're a demon. You have no moral obligation. I'll do it myself. Lily glanced at them with a miserable look on her face as Hao Ren told her what Isaacs had suggested. She wanted to do the honors herself, but when she raised her hand above her head, she hesitated. Will I die if I hit myself? If you can't do it, I will. Vivian gestured with her hands. But I guess it's going to take a while before you pass out. Before Vivian finished her sentence, she heard a thud. Lily had hit herself on the head and passed out. Hao Ren stared at the werewolf maiden in astonishment. Actually, I wanted to say, the MDT mentioned it has an idea on how to keep Lily's condition under control. Vivian laughed out loud. Wow, haha. Let's finish out dinner. Hao Ren woke up early the next morning, before the sun had even rose. He bumped into Vivian, who did not sleep the night before, and the early riser, Isaacs. The three of them spoke spontaneously. Let's check on Lily, doggy. After hitting herself unconscious since the previous night, Lily was not in any danger. By staying unconscious, she did not lose control and go on a rampage. In fact, Hao Ren and Vivian helped Lily back to her room that night. Hao Ren anticipated that Lily was going to wake up soon. He pushed the door open with Vivian, but what they saw shocked them. Lily was still in her werewolf form, and awake. She crouched on the bed and her wolf tail stood erect like a feather duster. Her back was facing them so they could not see her face. But Hao Ren could vividly feel a suppressed energy, which was gradually being released around her. He felt like he was confronting a beast. Vivian inched a step forward and Lily's ears stood up as she growled. Seconds later, Hao Ren saw a dazzling light. Lily had faded into a silver, lightning-like shadow. She flitted across the room, along the walls and ceiling before charging towards Vivian with her snarling fangs. Lily! Hao Ren shouted at her. Meanwhile, Vivian had already shape-shifted into a colony of bats which flew away in the air. The werewolf maiden missed her target. She stopped in bewilderment and began to sniff the floor. Hao Ren spotted that the werewolf was only going after Vivian and was not interested in him. He plucked up his courage and inched forward. Lily, can you hear me? Hehehe, tssss. All he heard was a series of indiscernible sounds coming out from her throat. She obediently raised her head. When she saw Hao Ren, she smiled. Landlord, dinner. Hao Ren was speechless. He began to doubt the possibility of saving such a hungry creature. Nevertheless, Lily still recognized faces that were familiar to her. However, Hao Ren noticed something. A layer of murkiness began to obscure her golden eyes, erasing the contrast between the pupil and the sclera. That was not all. Her breathing was irregular too, as with her facial expression which changed erratically when she spoke. It showed how screwed up her state of mind was. Witnessing her condition, Hao Ren slapped his forehead. He should not have waited until the next day. Lily's condition had deteriorated so quickly that it was only proper to send her to Raven the night before. Vivian was back in her human form. She edged cautiously round the back of Hao Ren and maintained a 5-meter distance from Lily. Hey doggy, are you going to bite me again? Would you? Not any more. Lily crouched on the floor, raising her foot to scratch her face. She could barely speak and it sounded clumsy. My eyesight's a little blurry. Just woke up, not entirely awake. Better now. Landlord, are you taking me to the doctor? Yes, right away. It ached Hao Ren to see that she could not even speak properly. He held the werewolf maiden by her hand and said, It's good to see you awake. Let me handle the rest. Landlord, don't touch me. Lily shook Hao Ren's hand off. I could fling you. Look, there you go flying again. Hao Ren got up from behind the sofa, staring in dismay at how muddled her head was. Can you tuck your ears and tail away? You can't board a bus like that. What? Are you asking her to take the bus? Vivian jumped to her feet protesting. You can't be serious. How can you let her out in public when she can kill someone with just her sneeze? Then what? Hao Ren had his hands spread out. Should have taken her out last night. It's daylight but she's not getting any better. Fret not, I'm prepping a portal, Isaac suddenly chimed in. I made a trip to Bastard Barrio last night. I've marked the location. The portal will be ready in a few minutes. Hao Ren took a long sigh of relief. I almost forgot, demons are apt dimensional travelers. But I still can't believe that you could open up a portal in an unfamiliar space. Isaac proudly replied, the physical constants of this world are somewhat different from ours. Yes, I had problems with establishing the connection initially. But like I said, it's the tricks of the trade. I tweaked the formula a little and tada, it worked. By the way, do you still have soy sauce? Did you just say soy sauce? The idea of calling up a portal in his living room was indeed a pleasant surprise. Hao Ren could now take pride in the fact that there was a more decent tenant in the house. The demonic portal sounded cool, but he could not believe what he had just heard. He strode over to his axe only to find the demon squatting and drawing a circular diagram in the middle of his living room. It was about of 2 to 3 meters in diameter. He drew it while held a dish in his hand. In the dish was some black liquid and it smelled like soy sauce. WTF. Why not? When you're at the level of a master, you can draw diagrams with basically anything, even water. All things hold demonic power. I once knew an awesome demon master, who calmly drew a line of hell fire with his pea in the face of 20,000 strong beastmen. He managed to hold it until help arrived. However, the old pretender later denied he had ever used the pea trick. Instead, he claimed to have performed a blood smear formation. Any more soy sauce? Yes, soy sauce right away. Screw it, I'm not gonna be pretentious anymore. I should have known, I'm never ever going to cross paths with anything that's state of the art. Vivian, please give the gentleman some soy sauce. After splashing a whole bag of soy sauce, Isaacs finally completed the teleportation diagram. The drawing medium notwithstanding, the diagram looked like it meant business with its complicated and exotic demonic runes. They were stacked into rings of 3. Rows of unintelligible incantations floated around in the center of the diagram like a living object. Just as Isaacs exerted his energy into the runes, the diagram emanated a red and green yet cloudy glow. The gateway was finally online. The only fly in the ointment was the smell of the soy sauce. And that thought kept ringing in Hao Ren's mind. Could things get any less magical than this? Anyway, it was the only way. Even if it was not magical, Lily's state of mind was deteriorating fast. She crouched on the floor without making a sound. Her pose and behavior had become characteristically wild and dog-like. Hao Ren had also witnessed her gnawing on the table leg during the few minutes that Isaacs was drawing his diagram. The total loss of his table was prevented only because the wood was too unpalatable. Isaacs got to his feet and pointed at his creation. Everyone, move inside the circle and I'll start the teleportation. Beware, this will work only once. So, we better go at once. Is it because soy sauce has a limited capacity of demonic power? Nope. Isaacs shook his head as he pointed his finger at Raleigh, the cat on the sofa. Judging from its audacious eyes, I can tell he'll lick the soy sauce clean once we're gone, thus spoiling the runes. Hao Ren jumped inside the circle at once. Alright, let's go. If we keep this conversation up a minute longer, I'm afraid I won't be able to convince myself that I'm going to be involved in more magic. Fortunately, the soy sauce portal worked without a hitch. Everyone on board arrived at the destination in one piece. Bastard Barrio appeared as it always was, deserted. No more than a few cars passed by in the day and the camouflage provided by the portal made their emergence less of a problem. Feeling nauseated, Hao Ren clung to a telephone pole. That was one hell of a flaky, soy sauce portal. Isaacs had an ingenious smile as he said, it's typically demonic, crude and simple yet practical. Try getting used to it. Still crouching like a wolf on the ground, Lily's head drooped from left to right. With extreme caution, Hao Ren poked her shoulder and said, Lily, are you all right? So far so good. Lily raised her head. There was no more reflection in her cloudy eyes, but her sanity remained. Where's the floating mansion? Hao Ren gave her an assuring smile as he found the familiar telephone pole with the old Chinese medicine sticker. Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to witness a moment of wonder. So, you guys decided to bring her here. Raven 12345 looked sideways at the werewolf maiden who was crouched on the floor. She growled menacingly. Don't say I didn't warn you. All my furniture's made of super alloy. If she breaks any of her teeth, that's not my problem. She wasn't this bad before we arrived, but after teleporting, she can't utter a word. On the bright side, she doesn't bite. Hao Ren explained awkwardly as he continuously pulled Lily's tail, trying to keep her away from Raven's office table. They were already in Raven 12345's office and Lily's condition had worsened since that morning. She was unable to walk upright on 2 legs. She could only lie down indifferently beside Raven's table. Occasionally she would let out a few beastly growls. She bit everything in sight, including the table and door frame. She even bit a passing arcane servant, but as a result, a shock wave blew up in her face, she could no longer speak because of that. Hao Ren knew Lily was mentally sound. The gnawing was just a distraction, to keep herself occupied with everything else except aggression. Biting the arcane servant was just an accident. The arcane servant did not even look human. Lily had probably mistaken it for a jelly. Even Vivian, who always locked horns with Lily, looked worried. Deep down, the vampire maiden was a kind-hearted person. She looked at Lily, feeling sorry. Should we find her some steel rods to gnaw? That won't be necessary. Raven 12345 waved as she signaled Hao Ren to step aside. Raven got down in front of Lily. She pulled Lily's head back so that Lily would raise her head. Hey little pup, look into my eyes. Interestingly, Lily was calm upon hearing Raven's voice. It was astounding contrast to her crazed state of mind earlier. Her breathing became smoother as she stared attentively at Raven 12345 before muttering, "Doc, Tor." "Yup. I'm your doctor. Look into my eyes. Tell me, what did you see?" Raven 12345 spoke in a pleasant tone of voice, which was so soothing Hao Ren could not help but bang his head into the wall. This was supposed to be how the psychotic goddess talked, he thought. A light of clarity flashed across Lily's eyes. She pondered for a long time before nodding. "There's a leftover noodle at the corner of your mouth." Raven 12345 smacked Lily's forehead. "I'm asking you to look into my eyes, not my mouth, you idiot." Hao Ren heaved a sigh of relief. Thank God, she's still the psychotic B*TCH who talks with just the right dose of bitchiness. Isaac stood by with his head lowered in reverence. He nudged Hao Ren in the arm and said, "Is this how the goddess is supposed to be over here?" "Yeah, have you seen any difference in the other world?" Hao Ren asked briefly. "Of course not," Isaac mumbled. 7 out of the 10 Shiling Celestials have fascioplegia. How did you run up against this one? Hao Ren was silent. Raven 12345 was trying to awaken something inside Lily. She held Lily's head sturdy as her own eyes emitted a bluish, white glow. Her voice was soft as well as magical. "No matter what you see, don't be worried. It's just an illusion, you're in a safe place. Tell me, little maiden, what do you see?" "Moon, a big moon." Lily was still crouching on the floor, but her muscles were beginning to relax slowly. "It's red. There's something seething on the moon like ocean waves, and there's really a noodle at the corner of your mouth, I swear. Be serious. Focus on my eyes." Raven 12345 wiped the noodle away. "Apart from that, what else? Recall everything that happened that night. Besides what you saw, what appeared in your mind?" "People on the moon. I couldn't see their faces, but I knew there were many of them. They were melting away and becoming part of the ocean. There were people on the ground too. Everyone was melting away. I was scared. I wished I could be stronger and escape from being melted, then. You didn't clean it enough, there's still some of the noodle left on your mouth." Raven 12345 then smiled. "Maiden, wield your weapon, you and me, only one will be left standing today." Hao Ren swiftly stepped in to intervene. He did not know why a solemn moment had turned sour, but he knew he had to be the peacemaker. Whoa, she's always rash and impulsive. Furthermore, she's left with only her brain stem now. By the way, what's wrong with Lily? You have a well-known vampire in your house. Raven 12345 got to her feet and gave Vivian an intense glance. She has great ability, but I'm afraid she doesn't know how to control it. The pup's doing fine. Her subconscious has been invaded by hallucinations of some disaster which she has no idea of herself. She has been bugged by nightmares which have caused her to lose control of her power. That explains her deteriorating condition. She is plagued by her own nightmare. Raven 12345 bent down and patted Lily on her head. "Actually, I've some good news to break." Not waiting for Raven 12345 to finish, Hao Ren chimed in, "Is she pregnant?" The entire house became as quiet as a grave. Only the sound of Lily gnawing at the table could be heard. Vivian looked at Hao Ren with a weird expression. "Landlord, what are you thinking about in that head of yours?" Hao Ren tried frantically to explain. "Isn't it always the case on TV? People always break the news of their pregnancy this way." Raven 12345 conveniently shot a tiny plasma ball, hitting Hao Ren on the head. Your brain's screwed up. It must be doing well in the City of Shadows. Considering the amount of scoundrels over there, I'm sure you've found your own kind. Talk about birds of a feather flock together. But, I was going to say, the pup's about to evolve. Upon hearing that, Lily stopped gnawing at the table leg. Her ears stood up and she listened expectantly. Apparently she had not gone mad. Evolve. Hao Ren felt it was rather magical. She's a digital babe. I'll send you for treatment after the pup. Delaying treatment isn't a good idea. Raven 12345 let out a long sigh as she shook her head. You guys didn't even know that this little girl's a minor. She's an adult, Vivian stepped up and exclaimed. Look at her. Does she look like a minor? It's just her shell. Raven 12345 twisted her mouth and said, maybe she's ripe physically, but as a werewolf, apparently her ability isn't up to par. Didn't Hao Ren mention that Lily doesn't possess any special abilities except brute strength? Good olfactory receptors too, Hao Ren busily added. Besides, she has a tail. That isn't King's special ability. Raven 12345 waved as she gave orders to an arcane servant. She then pointed at Hao Ren with an upset look on her face. Feed this gentleman some medicine, just enough to shut him up. Hao Ren dared not utter a word. On the other hand, Vivian nodded her head as though she was thinking about something. I've been wondering, although werewolves don't usually possess magical abilities, they at least have some natural skills like active violence, shadow steps, moonlight masking and the like. Doggy, however, doesn't have any of that aside from great physical strength and incredible health. However, what's most amusing is that, she thought her brick throwing, which she trained for 5 years, was her greatest trick. For that matter, I wonder if werewolves even evolve at all. As far as I know, their special abilities come naturally as they grow up. Doggy's going to experience an explosive evolution. I can't help it. Each one of you is weirder than the next, Raven 12345 said it in such a way that like it carried some deep meaning. Ordinary wolves evolve gradually, but due to the stimulation from your moonlight, this maiden's going to experience super evolution. Well, that's not a bad thing actually, she will evolve anyhow. Now, you've just saved 5 years worth of cleaning up damaged furniture. One thing you should know though, a werewolf's natural growth period is 5 years and hyperactivity happens during their power awakening. Hao Ren wiped off the cold sweat from his forehead. There was nothing more comforting than the knowledge that Lily was safe. She was just going through her natural physiological evolution, albeit it being a little out of control. Having known that, it was time to think of ways to help the idiot sail through her evolutionary process safely. Lily was placed into the bioenhancement and reconfiguration chamber as everyone else looked on. As the chamber doors slowly shut, Hao Ren's heart sank. Will this work? He looked at Raven 12345 wearily as the latter was glued to the machine's user manual, trying to figure out the workings. Seeing how unreliable Raven 12345 was most of the time, Hao Ren could not help but worry. Speaking of which, do you even know how to operate this thing? Oh, goodness, aren't you an annoying one? As clueless as I am, I'm still better than you. Using the MDT as a blunt force weapon, it's a wonder you still have the audacity to criticize me. Raven 12345 leered at Hao Ren. She quickly set her sights on Lily, who was lying in the chamber pod. Relax, it's fully automatic. I'm just confirming the command code in the manual. Will this actually prevent her from going berserk again? Vivian asked as she stared at the mixed alloy equipment. She was awed by the high-tech toy before her. She just needs to lie in it for a while and she'll be cured. Raven 12345 shrugged. This is just a temporary measure. The device can forcefully pacify her. After a few days, she will reach the peak of her evolution. When that time comes, just let her run free, somewhere spacious enough. Don't worry. With this reconfiguration, even if she goes berserk again, she'll still retain her thoughts. At most she'll be in her wolfen form, but she'll be harmless. That, I guarantee you. This was the treatment that Raven 12345 prescribed for Lily. In her words, Lily's growth was a normal process, one she would have to go through eventually, and only fools would have prevented it. All she needed to do was let Lily pass through this volatile period smoothly, with some tweaks here and there to her physical as well as psychological profile. The facilities available to them should do the job. Using the reconfiguration chamber, Lily's mental state was pacified and suppressed to its usual state, allowing her to regain control of her body. Her growth was progressing normally and the reconfiguration allowed her to safely go through the period of volatility. It would have counted as a blessing if she had undergone her evolution in one single, explosive transformation. Of course, letting her loose meant finding a suitable location. According to Raven 12,345's estimates, a pup like Lily, who was undergoing such an explosive burst of power for the first time, would not be able to hold their form. They could turn into full beast mode or go feral altogether. Having such a transformation take place in the living room would be a disaster waiting to happen. Hao Ren had that figured out. A barren place like the southern suburbs had no lack of wide, running plains. Beyond the back door of his house was a stretch of empty land reaching towards the hills. The area had no known inhabitants, not even a dirt path. Even if he allowed Lily to go wild all night long over there, he would not have to worry about disturbing the locals. Then again, werewolves are really one of a kind, aren't they? Hao Ren looked at the reconfiguration chamber, which reminded him of a casket. He had nothing noteworthy to say about Lily being in the pod and tried to change the topic awkwardly. Can she really turn into an actual wolf? She's adorably dim-witted most of the time. I can't quite imagine her going all feral. Blessed be the ignorant, Vivian scratched her head as she looked at Hao Ren. The latter's face was brimming with curiosity. When a werewolf goes feral, it will succumb to madness. What? Do you think it'll be like a lazy dog sprawled on the floor, playing dead? I was there when Fenrir ripped Odin in half. Oh, all that blood spurt. It was a bloody sight. Even most highborn vampires won't risk taking on a feral werewolf. Who cares if she's an idiot, that won't matter when she turns feral. Hao Ren decided to ignore the details about Fenrir ripping Odin to shreds. He knew that it was part of Vivian's foreboding past. He could only pat his chest to calm himself down. Well. Raven 12,345's guaranteed that if she transforms, she'll still keep her sanity. I'll just believe her this once. Aren't you interested to see how she'll turn out to be? Do you have any idea just how cute this contrast of character is? Vivian gave Hao Ren a very odd look. What does that even mean? I turned into a bat to clean the house plenty of times. Never saw you noticing that. Hao Ren was stunned. Ah, yeah. Why didn't I? As Hao Ren and Vivian's topic of conversation was getting way out of hand, Raven 12345 interjected. Right, are you guys done with your nonsense? If so, get into the pods as well. I'll be installing the translation module. Hao Ren almost forgot about that and was grimly reminded by Raven 12345 that he still had a date with the casket-shaped device. His looked forlornly at her. Eh? I thought you said that was not due for another 2 days. Oh, stop your whining. Let's get it done already since you're here. Raven 12345 snapped her fingers and the floor not far from them split apart. 3 new bioenhancement and reconfiguration chambers slowly rose from the ground. Anyhow, just get into the pod. Using the MDT as a translation tool is all fine and dandy but impractical at times. I'll install a translation module into your psyche and this will allow you to speak with all races of the Empire without impediment. Which is more convenient, you'll see in good time. Oh right, Isaacs, go into the one on the rightmost. It's a special variant which has a spatial regulator that can adjust itself to the shape of the user. It may look dainty but it'll fit. Vivian was the first to nod and seemed totally unfazed by the prospect of going into the coffin-looking machine. We just lie down in there, right? Me first. That's a bloody casket. Hao Ren reminded her but all he got was an unapologetic smile from Vivian. So, what's wrong if it's a casket? Not that I've never slept in one, mind you. There was a time where sleeping in caskets was a fad in the vampiric world. It had to do with one's status. I even saved up for one made out of walnut wood with a decorative cross to boot. Too bad I lost it during the wars in Europe. Vivian slowly approached the device as she spoke. She gently touched the alloy surface of the machine, a nostalgic look appearing on her face. This shape, this style, how I miss it. I loved sleeping in caskets shaped like this. A chill went down Hao Ren's spine as he heard what Vivian said. Additionally, a cold sweat started to form on his forehead. He was even more adamant about not going into the machine. However, his protests were of no avail. By the time he realized it, Vivian and Isaac had already gone into their respective caskets, leaving Hao Ren alone in the room and Raven 1 2 3 4 5 eyeing him dangerously. That dangerous look was not merely a psychological reaction. Do you want to go in yourself or do I have to haul your ass into it? Raven 1 2 3 4 5 pointed towards the reconfiguration chamber. If you really need me to. Before Raven 1 2 3 4 5 could finish her sentence, Hao Ren leapt into the casket with utmost agility. As the reconfiguration chamber sealed itself, Hao Ren quickly lost his consciousness. In a semi-lucid state, Hao Ren started dreaming. He saw himself standing on the surface of a body of water. It was indeed illogical, but he stood on it like it was firm ground. He looked around and saw familiar scenes on the shore, old-style houses, a noisy morning market and rolling hills as well as rivers he had never seen before. Yet, they were familiar. The phantasmagoria by the shore was ever-changing and ever-moving. Hao Ren was surprised by the sight. He clearly knew he was dreaming, but this did not happen the last time he was in the machine. He suddenly felt a shudder underneath him. As he peered down, a dark, foreboding shadow slowly surfaced. An unknown fear suddenly smothered Hao Ren. He felt that something particularly devilish was coming up from the deep abyss beneath him. The shadow in the water threatened to devour everything on the surface and beyond, but foremost, Hao Ren. Boom. A loud bang rang inside Hao Ren's head and he realized that the phantasmagoria around him had disappeared. He was now floating in a dark void. It was a familiar feeling. He knew it from when he first underwent the reconfiguration process. The short dream sequence earlier had seemingly disappeared without a trace. From a distance, Raven 12345's voice could be heard. I'm pretty sure I didn't hit the wrong button, but why is the red light lit? Hao Ren could not muster a response in that state. He was pretty sure the only reason he had not been killed by that lunatic of a goddess was his luck. The chamber's door opened without as much as a whisper and the sudden burst of light dazed Hao Ren. It took him a good while to get up. He gave his head a good shake and realized that there were no major changes on his body. It was very similar to the first time he underwent a reconfiguration or enhancement. It only took a few moments to complete. However, the living nightmare was so harrowing that just thinking about it sent chills down Hao Ren's spine. Raven 1 2 3 4 5 mucked around a crystalline interface which floated mid-air. It looked like the central command console of the bio-enhancement and reconfiguration chambers. She had a thick manual laying by her side. Looking at the usually unreliable goddess who was pretty much operating the device on a trial-and-error basis, Hao Ren shuddered. He glanced at the other three chambers and asked curiously, what's taking them so long? Oh, I'm doing some physical checks, Raven 1 2 3 4 5 answered without looking up. The lil wolf pup is still growing, Isaac just came from a different world and Vivian has some issues controlling her strength. Problem children, all of them. This is a good chance for me to give them a good check. No worries, their signatures look normal. And oh, how are you feeling? Raven 1 2 3 4 5 only looked up after finishing her sentence and she measured Hao Ren carefully. You look pretty good. I had a nightmare. Hao Ren could not even get mad at Raven 12345's demeanor anymore and simply recounted his dream to her. At the end, I saw something coming up to the surface and got violently woken up after that. Raven 12345's hand suddenly stopped. She stared at Hao Ren silently. I believe you should take every chance you have to train your mental fortitude in the plane of dreams. Your current mental strength is just too low and your psyche is problematic. You won't survive future encounters if you are to stay like this. What was that nightmare all about? Hao Ren felt that Raven 12345 had this habit of not fully conveying what she actually meant. He had to press on with his questions. I can see from your expression that there's more to it. It's the effect of the plane of dreams. Raven 12345 casually looked at Hao Ren. It will remember you after the first encounter and it will keep reappearing inside your head. It can be a dream or a mere illusion. What you see is the silhouette of the dream plane and reality reflecting off each other. Many who have entered the plane of dreams and survived, eventually succumb to the constant mental assault. Hence, you best work on training your mental fortitude while I'm still around. At least I can pull the brakes if anything goes wrong. Wait till you have a certain level of fortitude and the plane of dreams will be nothing but child's play. Hao Ren violently slapped his forehead. Why did this goddess have to go and ruin the nicety of what she had said earlier? Raven 12345 continued to bury her face in the manual and she slowly manipulated the control panels of the reconfiguration chambers. Hao Ren was quite literally bored to death and went to sit in a corner of the room. He stared at the advanced thingamajigs which looked like they came out of a sci-fi flick. Seeing the rate at which Raven 12345 was working at, Hao Ren felt that he was probably going to be stuck there for a while. He then pulled out the MDT from his pocket to surf the net. As lazy as Hao Ren was, he did not spend his past few days doing nothing. He still took improving himself rather seriously and realized that the MDT was one of his survival tools for future missions. Despite the system being way beyond his league, the data vault a mess, the abundance of bloatware, and an AI which saw him as a nuisance, the MDT was still a valuable tool. Hao Ren was still learning how to properly utilize the high-tech toy from Xi Ling Empire. There was some progress after a few days. Hao Ren finally found that the device had access to around a dozen different internet networks. Hao Ren felt like he should have known, the MDT's most important function was to connect to the other web. It was a given that an item of such an advanced civilization would not come with just a single setting. The only issue was the liberty Raven 12345 took in filling the MDT up with a boatload of apps. This really cluttered up its browser and made it hard to navigate. The MDT's AI had to reboot and recalibrate itself for the web module to function in tip-top shape. The list of networks that appeared on the screen stunned Hao Ren. Local settings chain, local web network, local galaxy network, local celestial group network, local universe network, macro world civilian network, macro world military channel, specialized channel network, centralized military channel network. Hao Ren suddenly realized that he was sitting on a treasure trove without knowing it. The array of networks and channels available on the MDT made him understand the true meaning of the phrase, "You're not alone." Thus, he eagerly fiddled with the listed networks. Most of the networks were not available to him as he had expected. He was just a newbie, fresh off the boat with only a single mission under his belt. Such encrypted channels were clearly off-limits to him. He could only access the local universe network at will. That was the only channel he had full clearance to. The next one was the macro world civilian network. Civilians probably used it, but it was directly monitored by the Space Administration. With smatterings of sensitive military information floating about in that channel, an agent with Hao Ren's level could only access a limited amount of information. The ones he could read were open information from the top brass. He could not connect to the network directly. Despite that, what he had was more than sufficient. He found that trying to comprehend things in the local galaxy network was enough of a struggle. Plus, he was so bedazzled by the amount of stuff that was going on there to even bother with the other networks or channels. As the MDT connected to the web, Hao Ren first saw an activity report window and he could see what was going on in the far corners of this galaxy. Unencrypted report, local galaxy network. Starting point, Kurgula 3. Repeating broadcast towards Dandwyn. The invasion of the Kurgulan main planet by the Kairums has ended. The Kurgulans won with their own martial might. The war did not exceed the observer's cordon as deemed by the local agent. No intervention required. P.S. Please retract the application for intervention. Report over. Unencrypted report, local galaxy network. Starting point, Chatur. Non-specific broadcast. The Chattarian star is dying. Estimated date of destruction is 326 imperial days from whence this report was sent. Medium alert event with the potential extinction of a civilization. Local agent gauged that intervention is required. Sending aid signal. The first available team to receive this report, please respond. Report over. Unencrypted report, local galaxy network. Starting point, Dandwyn. From satellite base, Sohar to Chatur. Local agent has idle shipping resources. Please advise if mass migration is required. The local system has no habitable colonies. Please apply for the creation of a new planet. The local administrative area is able to provide verification and also the documents required for the creation of a new planet. If needed, please use the dedicated channel. Report over. Unencrypted report, local galaxy network. Starting point, Saint Sir 4. Non-specific broadcast. Report over. Unencrypted report, local galaxy network. Starting point, Sohar satellite base. Direct broadcast towards Saint Sir 4. Did you forget the body of the report? Report over. Unencrypted report, local galaxy network. Starting point, Saint Sir 4. Non-specific broadcast. That was my cat. Report over. A flood of messages like these poured through the activity window as Hao Ren turned on the MDT. The volume of messages really did wonders in pulling Hao Ren out of his myopic worldview. Even though the messages were shortened bulletins, they still smacked Hao Ren right in the face. They showed the true scale of hustle and bustle that occurred throughout the entire universe. It was only days ago when they appeared before him, and Hao Ren's surprise was simply natural. I don't even understand smack, but it does feel awesome. Hao Ren muttered as he swiped through the messages in the channel. He did not know how he could interject. Frankly speaking, at his level, he did not even need to go to the upper channels. Just being able to access it at all gave him a sense of accomplishment. I may not be able to chat, but I still have a presence in this channel. Looks awesome, right? Yeah. Wanna join in? Yeah. But you're not even sure if what you did is worth mentioning, right? Are you done? Hao Ren slowly realized that the voice belonged Yo Raven 12345. He quickly turned off the MDT and stood up to greet her. Raven 12345 just waved him off. Oh, don't be so tense. Just treat it like you're chatting through the instant messenger at work. I'm not too bothered about it. Besides, it's good if you expose yourself to these things, broaden your perspective. It would be negligent of you to still remain a country bumpkin while being an agent. Just make sure you stay grounded and don't let these toys fool you into believing that you'll be godlike in a day. Oh, the wolf girl is the first to wake. Go have a look at her. Hao Ren turned to look at one of the chamber pods and saw the doors opening with Lily clumsily climbing out of it. She had reverted to her humanoid form. Lily, who finally regained her human form, swayed about by the reconfiguration chamber. It was almost like she was sleepwalking. She was testing her balance. Hao Ren was the same when he got out of the chamber pod. He feared that the alien technology had inadvertently screwed him over, giving him somewhat new quirks, a typical response from a country bumpkin. Hao Ren walked up to her and inquired, feeling better? Yeah, pretty good. Lily seemed to have returned to her usual jovial state and smiled brightly. She jumped on the same spot to prove that she had full control of her motor functions. You see, I'm not shaking anymore. And I can hide my ears and tail again. By then, the other two pods had opened up. Vivian and Isaacs were waking up from them. It looked exactly like one of the scenes from Biohazard. Hao Ren shook his head to rid himself of the nonsensical thought and greeted Isaacs first. Yo, do you understand what I'm saying? He was using Mandarin. It took a while for Isaacs to muster a response because he realized that his language issue had been resolved. He gasped. This thing sure is convenient. I finally don't have to struggle with a dictionary anymore. Oh doggy, you're back to normal. Vivian lithely leapt off the chamber pod. She still kept her distance from Lily at that moment. She only got close after confirming that the latter would not bite her. Still remember what you almost did the other time? You went straight for my jugular. I didn't really bite you, did I? Lily shifted awkwardly. I was a patient then. Can't you just let it slide? Hao Ren quickly interjected to play the peacemaker. All right, stop being a powder keg. You just met again. Lily, you too. When you were down, Vivian was worried, you know. Besides, the food that you eat at home is prepared by Vivian most of the time. Can't you two just play nice for once? Raven 12345 glanced at the four who were busy greeting each other after getting out of the pods. She did not deign to interrupt the lot. She casually fiddled with the controls, and as the pods were retracted back into the ground, a holographic image appeared in front of her. On it were pictures of Vivian, Lily, and Isaacs along with the reports of their scan. She stared at Vivian's report for some time before moving on. Lily's report, on the other hand, left her with a dumbfounded look. However, No one saw her reactions. It took a long while for Hao Ren to calm the two walking powder kegs down. Not long after that, he caught Raven 12345 signaling them to leave. He took a glance at the hologram and asked, "Is this the report for their health checkup? I don't understand a single thing and it doesn't look like a health report as well." "Of course you wouldn't understand. This is for experts," said Raven 12345 as she turned off the holographic projector. She then gestured Hao Ren to keep his distance. "All right, let's go back to my office. I still have things to tell you guys." Wait up, Lily and Vivian's portraits are labeled number 1 and Isaac's is marked as number 2. Does that mean? Hao Ren quickened his pace to question Raven 12345, but that lunatic was already out of earshot. He could only shake his head in resignation and followed. As they entered Raven 12345's office, Lily was the center of attention. "Your status is currently stable and you will be evolving in the next few days. I reckon that the process will take about 2 to 3 hours. You'll be conscious during the process, but you will not have control over your transformation, aura, and special abilities. So, you'll need a place without any inhabitants nearby." Raven 12345 explained with a disclaimer. "Provided that I did press the wrong button or misread the manual." Hao Ren instinctively ignored Raven 12345's last sentence. He quickly went for the most pertinent question on everyone's mind. "When will that be?" "Theoretically it should be during a full moon." Raven 12345 appeared unsure. "You know, like in the storybooks where werewolves transform under a full moon. And this lass here is affected by moonlight, so a full moon it is." Vivian nudged Hao Ren in the arm and whispered, "Is she reliable?" "Nope, but we don't have anyone else." Hao Ren responded with a resigned look. "I can hear you, the both of you, you know. Don't think just because you're whispering that what you say can escape my ears. Forget about it, you're not the first to say that anyway. Hao Ren, I suggest that you pay the Plane of Dreams a visit again. The plane has been active as of late. Maybe somewhat easier to communicate. Just stick to what I taught you, it's guaranteed safe." Hao Ren filtered out the last 2 words and nodded in assent to her suggestion. They had concluded their business there and figured that the goddess who ate cup noodles would not be preparing dinner for them. Hence, they left the place right after they reconfirmed the details of Lily's impending transformation. For once, Raven 12345 played nice and sent them off. Lily and Vivian were the first ones to step into the teleportation gateway. As Hao Ren and Isaacs prepared to leave, Raven 12345 suddenly popped a question. "So, you plan to live out your days like this? You're sure about not going back at all?" "There's no need for that." Isaacs turned around and gave his signature, scary smile. His voice, however, was earnest. "I've tried and failed. It can only mean that my methods were ineffective. I'll let them choose their own path. Time will tell anyway." Hao Ren knew that it was wrong to eavesdrop on private matters, but he was curious to know about the demon's past. He could not help but ask, "Say, what's Isaac's story anyway? He seems to have people after his head." "Him? I guess you could call it a failed career." Raven 12345 shrugged. He was a big boss back in his own world, with money and influence. However, his methods of doing business differed from the rest. As he got a foothold in the market, others pretty much ganged up on him. He pretty much lost everything, including his life, to his rivals. He was getting beaten to a pulp when an administration observer passed by. I think this left a black mark on him, a BIIIGGG1. Hao Ren was lost for words. "Sorry, you know how I am." Raven 12345 smacked herself on the head. "Just leave it at that." Isaacs did not speak or prevent Raven 12345 from telling his story. He only protested slightly at the end. "The part where I got beaten to a pulp could have been left out." "Oh right, you were actually strung up and beaten." Isaacs was speechless. Hao Ren could not bear to listen anymore and indicated that he understood as much as he needed to about the demon's past. Both of them then leapt into the gateway. As Raven 12345 gazed upon the closing gateway, she was deep in thought. Finally, she muttered to herself, "Can we really rely on this bunch of ragtags?" Of course, the group could not have heard what the goddess thought of them. They were on the sole, rickety bus back to the southern suburbs. The first thing they were going to do upon arriving was to clean the floor. Isaacs had used 2 packets of soy sauce to make a roughly 3-meter wide teleportation circle. The smell was overwhelming to say the least. A good scrub was in order. This was something you would not see often, a group of protagonists scrubbing the floor upon reaching home. After they finished cleaning up, Lily's stomach growled in hunger. Her consultation with Raven 12345 had already taken up a good half of the day, and the goddess did not even offer them water. It was already late noon, and Hao Ren would have doubted the treatment if Lily was still not hungry by then. Seeing that the wolf pup had recovered and returned to her usual lifestyle of eating, sleeping, and playing, Hao Ren could finally relax. The rest of the day went by with nothing out of the ordinary. Soon, night arrived, and it was time to pay the Plane of Dreams a visit. It was getting late, and Hao Ren was making the final preparations for his journey to the Plane of Dreams. Well, to be honest, it did not really need any preparation. Hao Ren would enter the Plane of Dreams by lying on the bed and falling asleep. Any other preparation outside the dream was not going to help inside the dream. Lily had been quite exhausted from the past 2 days. She needed to be well prepared for her evolution during the full moon in the next few days. As such, she went to bed before 9 o'clock that night. Vivian and Isaacs were in the living room prepping for Hao Ren. Vivian had extracted a pot of medicinal herbs for Hao Ren to boost his energy. She supervised Hao Ren as he drank 2 big bowls of medication. She then looked at him with a concerned face and asked, "How is it? Do you feel better?" Hao Ren smacked his lips. The strange taste of medicinal herbs numbed his tongue. However, when he looked at Vivian's concerned expression, he felt bad saying no. He just nodded and said, "Well, it works. Now I feel quite energetic, like I just woke up. One more then." Vivian was very happy when Hao Ren said so. She grabbed the bowl from Hao Ren and filled it with black, greasy gruel. I tell you, no one knows about herbs in medicine these days. Not even veteran doctors. This prescription was created by Li Shizhen back when he passed by a small village. It helps to refresh and calm your mind. Entering the Plane of Dreams is actually a nightmare. As long as you keep your mind strong and clear, then there's nothing to worry about. Hao Ren hurriedly refused the offer and let her take the bowl away. That's enough. If I keep drinking, I'm not going to be able to sleep anymore. Don't be so nervous, all right? I'm just taking a nap. How can we not be nervous? Vivian put the medication on the table and said, I've heard about the Plane of Dreams. That place is not just an ordinary dream world. Many people have actually died in it. Raven 12345 just promised that you wouldn't die in it because half dead is not considered dead. Even Vivian said so, thus, one could imagine the wide spread of Raven 12345's bad character. If only my blood magic works for you. Vivian suddenly sighed. Lots of the spells within the Blood clan are devoted to the mind, which is definitely better than letting you drink this medication. Why doesn't the blood magic work on you? Even Raven 12345 could not explain it, let alone Hao Ren. He just gave her a half-hearted smile. Isaacs took the opportunity to ask, or maybe I could try creating a protection for you using our magic. Hao Ren waved his hands and said, don't bother. My body is immune to magic. I can't even use the buff given by my teammates. This unfortunate physique. How will you know if you don't try it? Isaacs was stubborn. Whatever that was on his mind, he had to give it a try. He did not care what Hao Ren said. Right away, he wrote a dark green rune in the air and patted Hao Ren on the back. Is it working? He asked. Hao Ren was totally stunned. When he realized that the big demon's magic had worked in an instant, his mind was refreshed. His consciousness of his surroundings was elevated to a state he had never experienced before. He did not know what mental force it was. However, he was sure that the rune on his body had absolutely stimulated his mental strength. Aren't I immune to magic? Hao Ren was particularly puzzled by his momentary elevation of mind. However, what was even more surprising was his susceptibility to Isaacs' runes. A few seconds later, he remembered what Raven 12345 said. Partial immunization. I remember the psycho telling me that I was only immune to certain kinds of magic. So you're not immune to demonic power? Vivian looked at Hao Ren with surprise. Suddenly, she frowned and said, "Then you better be careful next time. Don't think you are really immune to all kinds magic anymore. Don't let other demons hurt you. Not every demon is as friendly as this big guy." Hao Ren nodded. After which he stood up and said, "This is it. I feel like I'm in a really good state. I'm going to sleep now." "Vivian, you sleep late at night, right? Please help me to keep guard around here." Raven 12345 said that when I'm connecting to the plane of dreams, something strange may occur. Help me observe and record any unusual scenarios. I'll report to Raven 12345 later. Vivian promised Hao Ren repeatedly. Isaacs also scratched his bald head. He then laughed and said, "Let me help you as well. I'm quite interested in the plane of dreams in your world. It's a pity that I can't get in. I can only watch from the side." Hao Ren thought finally, he was a big shot. He had a vampire and demon as his bodyguards when he walked back to his room. How powerful did one have to be in order to have such privilege? Yet, when he reached the door looking all manly, something just did not feel right. He then turned round, not really sure if he wanted to laugh or cry at what he saw. "I'm just going to sleep. Do you the two of you have to look so solemn?" "Oh." Vivian and Isaacs replied. They silently bowed their heads with a solemn expression. Suddenly, the atmosphere of the living room felt like a funeral home. Hao Ren was left speechless. Hao Ren knew there was no way to communicate with the two of them. He could only shake his head and walk into the room. He lay in bed and did as Raven 12345 said. He adjusted his mindset and quietly underwent self-hypnosis. He put the mobile data terminal next to him and waited silently to enter the plane of dreams. Half an hour later, the door opened. Hao Ren walked out in his pajamas, swinging his arms. Vivian and Isaacs looked at him in surprise and asked, "Landlord, it's over." Hao Ren scratched his face awkwardly and said, "I need to go to the bathroom. The 2 bowls of soup are too powerful." Vivian had nothing to say. After using the bathroom, Hao Ren went back to his bedroom and continued to stay in bed. Half an hour later, he finally realized something was really not right. Vivian's medicinal diet and Isaac's magic had indeed fortified his mental strength. However, these two things had one common effect. Both of them helped to refresh his brain. What rotten luck. He was having insomnia. I should have known that they couldn't be trusted. I shouldn't have let them help me. Hao Ren quickly got up, but in the end, he lay down again. What's the use of running out now? Should I let Vivian hit and stun me? Or let Isaacs hypnotize me with magic? Doesn't matter whether they work or not, no one can enter the plane of dreams by force, he thought. Hao Ren was tossing and turning in bed. He could not fall asleep. In the end, he had no choice but to touch the MDT beside his pillow and said, "Connect Raven 12345. It is impossible to dial the phone number 000000012345 and reach the psychopath using regular mobile phones. The line could only be connected via internal devices like the MDT." Luckily, Raven 12345 was on duty this time and she did not seem to rest at night. Soon, her jarring voice rang in Hao Ren's mind. "Yo, Hao Ren. You've already strolled around the plane of dreams. So fast." "Not yet. I encountered some problems and I can't go in now." Raven 12345 was surprised and asked, "Can't get in? Haven't I already told you how to adjust your mind and self-talk? The mobile data terminal can also guide you." "No. That's not the problem. I have insomnia." "The heck? Can you be a little more reliable?" said Raven 12345. Hao Ren really did not want to be judged by a psychopath. However, in reality he could only fake a smile and explain what had just happened. Raven 12345 was speechless after hearing Hao Ren's explanation. Finally, she said, "What kind of people are you surrounded by? What kind of people have I found?" "So. Don't worry, I'll find a way," Raven 12345 said with great vehemence. Hao Ren's spirit was immediately lifted. He thought she was finally using the power of a goddess to do something right. Unfortunately, she continued to say, "Let me sing you a lullaby." Hao Ren could not recollect the events after that. He could only remember that everything went black the moment Raven 1 2 3 4 5 started singing. When he opened his eyes again, all he could see was a prairie. There was a small moon and a big moon hanging in the sky. A cool breeze was blowing in the prairie under the sky while a blanket of brilliant yet unfamiliar stars covered the sky. The scenery was familiar. Hao Ren realized that he had successfully entered the plane of dreams. And he appeared at the same place as last time. A distant howl of wolves came out of nowhere. Damn it! Hao Ren was aghast. Damn, is the dream also divided into part 1 and part 2? Does it continue from where it last left off?